Okay, hello and welcome to the Tuesday, July 7th meeting of the Finance Committee, 7-7. There you go. Good, lucky day to be meeting. To begin the meeting, I'd like to repeat the following statement. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's website within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this point, we'll take a roll call of the membership. Mr. Alfred.
Here.
Ms. Zimmer.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
And Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Okay, and I am, of course, here, so we are now officially called to order. Okay, so I'll start by giving just a couple of quick, brief updates, because I know we have to get through the warrant and the budget today. So first, I'm going to defer minutes till next week. So once we're done getting the report out this week, we can spend, next week will be a much quicker meeting. We'll probably have one more line item transfer for the police. This is not a reserve fund transfer, it's a line item transfer. Sharon said that she was looking at something today, and she said one of their lines, she might need to move a little bit of money from one line to another. So she gave me the heads up that we're probably going to see one more line item transfer next Tuesday. After that, obviously, what's done is done, because the 15th is the close of our fiscal year officially, and the close of our superpowers for the year. So there's that. The other thing is that from an administrative point of view, right, the objective tonight is to get through the budget and get through the warrant and with all recommendations. Mary and Sharon have prepared all the boilerplate stuff. I've talked to Chris and Chief Cassidy about preparation of the report. So we're all tuned to go as soon as we get through a warrant message, a budget, and article recommendations tonight, okay? So with that, we'll just start out before we dive into that with a quick update, since I see Chief Cassidy's on. If you want to give us any updates related to the COVID situation, anything we need to know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing financial related. I did have to make a small purchase of some cleaning and sanitation equipment last week, but that was all within the model that I had prepared with the initial CARES Act request. It was about less than $600. No new cases, so we are continuing to stock up on PPE in anticipation of supply chain shortages, which will be occurring again this fall.
Yeah. Now, is that, just out of curiosity, is that because you're expecting it's the things to get worse as well? Not necessarily here, but I'm saying things to get worse, or is it because of what's going on right now in the South that's going to put pressure on supply chains?
So it's a combination. People are anticipating a second wave, even though we're not through the first wave yet. And yes, as there are spikes in multiple states right now, there are, again, limitations on the availability of some supplies. So anytime one of our vendors says that they've got certain things that they have an allocation for us, we're stocking up on it to make sure that we are not deprived in the future.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions for the Chief about the COVID stuff? Okay, if not, thank you very much, Chief. As I said, the goal tonight is to make it quick and get through what we need to get through. So feel free to jump in if you have anything else later, if you think of anything else you want to, Okay, so item one, the budget. You saw the spreadsheet. I will give you the reasoning behind some of the updates. That we need to update some of the numbers we had from last week. The primary driver for this was that the spreadsheet does not currently have the correct salary numbers in it. The calculation is done automatically, I mean, and that's just because I think it's just a data source mismatch with the accountant's office at the moment. So after our meeting last week, I sent our recommendations to Sharon and said, can you vet these and make sure that these line up with the salaries we expect to have? And that they should have for the people, the people that split years and steps and lanes, not steps and lanes, steps and things like that. And she came back and said, I'm finding several discrepancies. Some of these match up perfectly, but they're And then she said, yeah, these guys never adjusted their budgets back from the 1%. So if you looked at most of the changes, you'll see that, as I said, I color coded it so you know which ones had changed. The green ones were all things that changed as a result of Sharon vetting the salaries. Okay? So there were mostly adjustments down because some budgets had not taken out the 1%. So they're small dollar amounts. We're talking, relatively small numbers. So we have to change those. But then there were the big changes from last week where we didn't have the facilities manager in there. So that was added. That was 97,783. And the select board budget, which we had as, I think, 317 or 301 or something like that, they had not given us an updated number. Jeff had not given us an updated number. So that was based on the last request they had given us. And then to that request, I had added what I knew about some adjustments that have been made since then, the new TA and things like that. But Sharon today gave me the new number based on the calculations that she had and the overlap with Jeff. Jeff's going to be paid for a couple of weeks, because his last day is next Friday or something like this, or what I mean? Like there's like a little bit of round off there between the two TAs. So so that ends up, that's where you get the 351. Between that 351 and the 97, that put us in deficit. Okay. Now, okay, Suzanne, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can the version that was sent out 5 hours ago has the select board at 301?
Yes, that I sent out another one like 10 minutes or half an hour after that.
Sorry, I have the wrong one up. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
301's flat is the zero budget. So
What'd you say, Dan?
301 is the zero, the 0%.
Right. So basically the 51,885 there. Now there were a couple of things extra in there. One is the TA adjustment for the new TA. One is the fact that with Andrea out on sick leave, that we approved the transfer for more hours for Donna to cover that. What they are doing in the select board office right now is they're trying to bring on a few hours. I don't know. It's non-benefit. It's a non-benefit position, but they're trying to bring on some clerk help to help Donna in the absence of Andrea. So there's additional money. It's a few $1,000s. I think it was like 4,000, something like that they added into the budget to cover that. So that's where. So the 351 is not just a TA. There are a couple of other little adjustments because of the current situation in that office. But the end result of all that is that it put us into deficit by about $50,000 or $60,000. Okay, and let me just go back for 1 second here. Just give me a second, Sue. I'll tell you exactly when it was sent. It was 1:10 p.m. But I'll send it.
Yeah, that was the one that has the 301 in my version.
I have it open now. It's recommended 351.
Yeah, it's got 351. I'm looking at it now too. It says 351.
I don't know why.
So I can forward it again if you let me just.
If you don't mind, I don't know why it's coming up. I pulled it up twice.
So make sure you close all old ones.
I didn't change the name. That'll tell you, right? So,
Yeah,
so
it says select board 301.
No, just try closing all versions you may have open because
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It may be because
Yeah, no, I don't have anything else open. I'm literally pulling it in through the email and I don't have anything else open. I don't even have it.
I just sent it to you again.
Okay, thank you. Apologize.
No worries, right? So the bottom line is that it ended up creating a deficit. We thought we had it balanced last week. So I was pondering, and obviously as a committee, we have to figure out what we're going to do, but I didn't want to go into tonight without a solution to that problem. So I started digging into some things and said, okay, well, if we needed to find, 60 or 75,000, how could we get there? Because I didn't, to be honest with you, and again, you guys may disagree, but my take was, I really don't want to go above 400 in the reserve. The capital expense. Okay, what's wrong with me? The stabilization fund. I'm naming all the funds one by one here. I didn't want to go higher than 400,000 from stabilization because we moved the reserve fund up to 600, and it's a relatively straightforward discussion to say, The reserve fund's typically 315. We cut it down a little bit because of the budget savings, but then we're going to move 400 from stabilization into that to make it 600. And with the idea that this is our kind of COVID protection money, because this budget will go beyond 12/31, which is when all the COVID money runs out. Okay. If we start bumping that up to 500,000, then you're sitting there saying, well, 500 out of 600,000 of the reserve fund, we would already then know we're using it for something in operating, because we could have, given our run rates in the reserve fund the last 2 years, we probably could have run at 200,000 or 215,000 or something like that, but we wouldn't have been able to run at 100,000. So, we can still do that if we want, but I was just thinking, okay, I really didn't want to go above 400,000. So I sat there and said, can we squeeze any harder? And I talked to Mary and said, where do we have any possibility of squeezing some money out of us? And she said to me, well, we have the 100,000 for unemployment, and we have zero clue as to where that's headed, because we won't get a bill. They told us we're not going to get a bill till August or September. So we don't know, we're thinking it's going to go up. But then I said to her, what was our run rate prior to this? And she said, the last 2 years, it's been sub $10,000. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, no, finish what your
Okay.
thought. I have an idea. And then
So anyway, so then we started talking about, she said you could bring that down, but then the understanding, she said, you have to understand that we have no idea where unemployment's going to end up. So you might need to come fix it later if there's an unemployment funding problem like you did this year. And then she said, from the benefits perspective, we have the reserve for salary account, which is the 75 grand, and she said, generally that's funded at 75,000 to cover things like people leaving who have accumulated sick time and things. So you don't have to take it out of the operating budget in that sense, right? It's a pool for paying departing employees. So she said, there's money in there. We can probably take another 25 grand out of that, knowing that we've got one payment due to Jeff, because Jeff's leaving. So whatever his accumulated time is will get paid. But she said that there'll be some there, but if we have people, like a lot of people leaving or something, then you might have a problem there. But she said, and I said, well, the whole goal is, we're trying to not be in a position of letting people go necessarily. So hopefully that keeps unemployment low and keeps the need for that reserve for salary. So she said, yeah, you can run them a little tighter than we usually do if we need to. And so she said, it's probably a decent idea to get the 75 back. And that's what I did. And so that gives us to a balanced budget. But we just have to be aware that it's trimming a little bit. It's not unrealistic, just to be clear. None of those numbers are unrealistic. They're just trimming a little closer than we usually do. So, okay, go ahead, Dan.
yeah, so I mean, it's not a bad idea. My concern is that everything that we've done is trying to set ourselves up so that if we don't have October town meeting for whatever reason,
right,
we are okay basically till May.
Mm-hmm.
And in theory, with what we're doing here, there could be things that might happen that would cause us some problems by doing it this way, right? And I'm not even thinking that retirement speed up, but what if someone gets sick and they decide to just basically, sort of leave because of that and get paid out, or there's some weird kind of rules in the unemployment law that aren't totally clear on who may get benefits for different types of sickness, just sort of being out and such, which we don't know, so we don't really know the full potential impact to the unemployment rate. My thinking going into this is that we would probably look at bringing down our capital set aside a little bit. And the reason I don't like that, but the reason I think I'd be okay with it is that if we don't go to October town meeting, it's meaningless, because we're not going to be spending any more money on capital anyway. So it would not have a negative impact that way. Hopefully we can make up with it with free cash, or at the very worst, we spend a little bit of our capital expenditure fund down if we need to, which, given where we are, we're probably okay to do that. So that was kind of my thinking, to sort of keep those sort of other budgets where we were. And again, it makes it a little bit harder to kind of pick back up and build back up the capital set aside that we've been doing a really good job at. And so that does make me nervous. But I agree we shouldn't be taking more money from stabilization. So that as far as I'm concerned is definitely.
Well, let me ask you a question. If we did that and we said, okay, let's move unemployment up to, and obviously other members feel free to chime in on this, but if we moved the unemployment back up to 100, and we put the 25 grand back in the benefits budget, that reserve for salary. So we move up 75, and then we took the capital down 75 to balance that, right? So now we're at 1,425, right, for capital. Would you be okay if we then made a commitment we don't need necessarily a vote, but I think just the 7 of us kind of agreeing that this is what our approach would be, that whatever we get for free cash, we have no idea what it is, right? It could be 200, could be 500, could be, $1 million, right? That the first thing we do is we restore stabilization. We put back the 400,000 that we took, and then the next thing we do is we bump capital. We put into capital the difference between where we would have been and where we are. So in other words, that would mean the next 325,000 of free cash. So if we had, and I don't know where we are, right? It's too early to know. But let's say we got 800,000 in free cash, then we'd say, okay, 400 goes back to stabilization, 375 goes back to, or whatever it is, 1,750, whatever it was, the delta between 1,750 and 1,425. So, right, so 325 would go back into capital to bring it up to a 1.75 million for this year, and then we decide what we do with the rest.
In principle, my only caveat is just saying we don't yet know what the state is going to do yet and what the federal government is going to do. So my only caveat would be if things come in much worse from the state, because it looks like they're going to start second waving us, and they're going to say, well, even though we're really currently only projecting 6 billion with a B,
yes,
of reduced revenue. We're looking at some other states and what's happening when they get their second wave, and now they've got to shutter things back, which we weren't fully kind of anticipating all that, and it's not going to be 10. That's my only caveat is saying I think that our goal should be to do exactly as you said, but that we need to kind of keep in mind if we're in October trying to make this decision, or whenever we're making this decision, the sort of the situation on the ground, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that the facts and circumstances have to be evaluated at the time. I like that approach to the extent that we can do it, but if other things come up and we need to spend on other things, I think we should have the capability to do that. My other question, Ken, was going to be is that we know Jeff is leaving. We must know what the payout is. So,
yes.
I mean, did we get that? I mean, do we know what the pool is that we have to work with?
Yeah, Sharon, not Sharon, no, Mary said she knows. She didn't tell me what the amount was, but she said that would more than cover it. But then she said if we have a couple of other departures, it might be a problem.
It might.
But I just realized something. Well, go ahead.
No. It just might be good to know how much flex there is in there, like to understand what the amount is.
Yeah.
So maybe if she could get that to you, well, I guess we have to decide tonight. So
right,
maybe
but I think I just
matter.
See, this is why it's good to have these discussions. I think I figured out a potential way out of this. Okay. We have the 200,000 in free cash from FY20. We're using 100,000 of that to do the up branch that we were supposed to do last year. They didn't have a chance to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have 100 left. Okay. That 100, the one thing I was going to get to this later, but I'll bring it up now. The capital article has in it $12,000 for the maintenance improvements at Senior Center, which was one of those things we were intending to use the free cash money for, right? So what we might do is take 12. So now we have 100,000 of FY20 free cash. Take 12,000 of that, put it into the COA budget, earmarked for these maintenance improvements, because we have no other mechanism now to do that, right? So put in this budget just like we did with Up Branch. Take the remaining, $88,000 and put that into capital. And then, so we lower the appropriation, or we keep the appropriation at whatever 88, subtract 75 plus 88. So, whatever, 13,000 more than what we have in the spreadsheet now. But then on the bottom, we add in the rest of that free cash, and it's not going to operating because we're dedicating it to a one-time into capital.
Canara.
That's why when we were talking about it, it suddenly dawned on me, pardon my language, but we have that money. And I was like, I knew we had it, but I was trying not to use it because I didn't want to put it in operating. But then when you mentioned capital, I'm like, that's true. We can make up the capital with the free cash, and it's not an operating. So, okay, go ahead, Mr. Maxwell.
In the course of the conversation, my concern actually We discussed it. I'm sorry, I should have put my hand on.
It's okay, Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I'm just confused. What are you saying about the 12,000 for the senior center? Are we going to increase their budget?
We have no ability. We have no ability to give them the maintenance money other than through their budget.
No, they have 12,000 for improvements.
No,
Right
but
now it's a capital expenditure.
that cannot come out of capital. That's not a valid capital expense. That was the whole reason we had taken it off in October.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So that's why I said what we have to do, and this is the housekeeping part, right? We knew we put 100 into DPW for the up branch,
Yep.
and now we're putting 12,000 into COA. So we'd have to make sure we take that out, the 100 and the 112,000 out next year.
But we
Okay.
reduced the capital expenditure set aside by 75, but then we put the 88 down at the bottom to move into the capital expenditure fund.
Well, what we would do, here's what we would do. So from the spreadsheet perspective, here's what would happen. The 1.5 would actually go to 1.513. So it goes up to 1,513,000, right? So we added 13,000 to that, okay? We then, for the Council on Aging, take that up by 12,000, and that becomes 244,161. So that covers the maintenance there. And then in the bottom where we have the part that says for the free cash line says 100,000, change that to 200,000 because that's what we had. And then go back and restore it, and then the benefits
We
budget
have 83,000 at the bottom line.
because we haven't taken out. So now unemployment goes back up to 100,000.
Oh,
Right? And the benefits budget goes up by 25, so it goes back to whatever I had before there, 456, 641. Right? And now we're back where we started, but now everything's whole. And now the beauty, as I said, the advantage of that, having had this discussion about capital, is that the 200,000 we put in is not being used for operating expenses. It's all distributed in the budget. That 13,000 remainder went into capital. The 12,000 went into I shouldn't say that. 83,000 of it, or 88,000 went into capital. So we took out 75 from capital, as Dan was saying, but then added back 88. So we ended up with the net of 13, right? We took 12,000 of it, put it in COA for their maintenance. Took 100,000 of it, put it into up branch for the DPW for up branch. And so next year, when that 200,000 just goes off, we're taking 100,000 out of up branch, we're taking 12,000 out of COA, and technically speaking, our capital appropriation would be at 1,450 or 1,425. So that would be the starting point for FY22. Okay, so no operating budgets would be benefiting from that free cash, so to speak. Okay, so anybody, does that sound like a plan?
yes.
Yep, that works for me.
Okay, so, okay,
Same.
that's yes. Who's,
No, I just said same.
okay, I was looking at
Takes me
spreadsheets, I didn't see if anybody's hands were raised.
It takes me forever to get the mute off. Sorry.
Yes. No, that's fine. Okay, so so did everybody make these changes on their local copy, or do you want me to, that's why I was reading out the changes, so you could make them if you wanted to. But I can also just send out, if you guys didn't, I can just save what I have and send you the final copy, what we just discussed. So for voting purposes. Okay, so let me do that.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Okay, this is the one advantage of the remote participation. It makes it easier for me to do this. Okay, just got sent to everybody. Okay, now if the, once you guys all get it and pull it up, if everybody's fine with where we are and this is it, then again, given that we have to do roll call votes, I'm not going to do a roll call vote on every single budget. But I will say that we can have our own consent agenda for this, and just say, we just say that the motion would be that we recommend an omnibus budget as indicated in the recommended column
Right.
of our budget spreadsheet dated 7/7/20.
Do we have to reopen because we voted last time? It's in the minutes.
Yes, that's true. Okay, yeah, we can. I mean, yeah, we can.
Just don't, let's just do the ones that we're going to change because I'm going to still vote against a lot of them. Not necessarily, so I don't want to. I think we just do that.
Which ones are you going to vote against? You voted against that whole list from last week.
I'll vote against the select board budget, and then all the ones I voted against last week.
Okay. So select board budget and everything you voted. Well, I'm just trying to think because I'm looking. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 lines to revote.
We only touched a couple. We only touched a couple budgets.
No, just now we only touched a couple, but all the things in green in the spreadsheet are different numbers than what we voted.
Well, can't we vote the changes based on the color in the spreadsheet?
We can, as long as we're on record as what our recommendations actually are, and we have the votes for these things, then we're good. So how we decide to construct the motion is up to us. What I'm saying is we either vote 20 changes one at a time, or you're saying just vote the changed budgets. And, but then that gets to Dan's point about which ones he objects to. That's why I said I thought it would be easier to just say, we'll reconsider and then vote this spreadsheet as our budget. And then Dan can just note his objections like he did last week.
Okay, so I make a motion, we reconsider our vote from last week.
Our budget recommendations from last week. Okay.
Second.
Right.
Okay, seconded. Okay. Any further debate on that? Can we proceed to a vote? Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker? I caught him. See, he's in square number 3 this week.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Okay, so that carries. So now I will entertain a motion, and this is, I think, how we want to structure it, is to say the Finance Committee votes to recommend a budget as indicated in the recommended column of the General Fund, FY21 General Fund Workbook dated 7/7/20.
Second. Nope. Mr. Maxwell, second.
Okay, second by Mr. Maxwell. Okay, now what we will do is I'll save you for last, Dan. So I'll do the vote for everybody else, and then you can cast your vote with the objection so that Mark can get down the objections again. So Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I abstain like last
Okay. Okay, Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Alfred, go ahead, vote. Go ahead, roll.
Yes for all budgets except the following. Select board, town accountant, board of assessors, treasurer collector, technology, conservation commission, planning board, economic development, fire department, ambulance, building inspector, DPW highway, board of health, council on aging, youth and family services, and DPW water. Oh, and I abstain on the library. I think you got to get that one, Mark. I think we. Oh, that's right. Abstain on the library.
And you're for everything else?
And I'm for, as long as Mark got all the right ones in the end.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do me a favor
Yeah.
and email me that list of what your votes are so that I reflect it in the FinCom report correctly.
Yep. Just for clarification, it's all the ones with the head managerial salary.
No, I know, but I just want to make sure I match what you just said.
And the select board is just, as we'll probably get to it a little bit when we start talking about the wage tables. I just have some issues there that.
Okay, yeah, we'll go, as soon as we're done with this, we're going to get to the warrant.
Yep.
So, okay, so that carries Mark, and as I said, Dan, do me a favor, probably send Mark and me the list of the things so we make sure we get it recorded right, the objections. Okay, so we have a budget and it actually has a bottom line that matches. Yes, Mr. Whitaker.
I don't know if you need to actually say it or not, but I don't think you declared your vote.
Oh, yes, I vote aye. Thank you. It's because I'm not usually listening to a long list of objections when I vote aye at the end. So, okay. Okay. So we have a budget. It's actually balanced, and it's not fantastic, but it'll get us through another year.
Just one comment. Sue
Yes.
last time voted against the Department of Health's budget.
Oh, there you
I
go.
did.
You want to do it again?
Yeah. No, it's okay. We can keep going.
You just say, you don't, if you want to, you just say it.
I was gonna say, it's up to you. If you want to, he just recorded as no on Board of Health if you want it, so.
Okay, I would. That would be great. Thank you.
And
Thanks,
actually, in the
Vin.
minutes from last week, Mark, you forgot that.
So, okay. Any other issues with the budget? So we finally made the sausage for FY21. And just as an FYI, I have there's been some email, I don't think it's gone to everybody necessarily, but there have been some emails about, Karen, for those of you who saw when Karen and Carolyn were at the select board meeting a few weeks ago, they mentioned a few other programs that they were bills pending, technology grants, things like that. I emailed Pooja today and I have a call with her tomorrow because I said to her ahead of town meeting, I really want to understand, the legislative session's about to end. So, at the State House. So I said, I want to find out what the story is with all these bills. Did they get passed into law? If so, when do they, get us a clear picture on what pools of money are out there? And one thing I will just clarify very quickly, because I think there has been some confusion on this, right? The CARES money, that 1.3 million we keep referring to as the CARES money, is a small piece of the actual CARES money. The CARES money did not give Holliston 1.3 million. What it did was it gave the state of Massachusetts $2.7 billion. Okay? They took a piece of that. It was with the direction that this is supposed to be used for coronavirus, helping with the economic fallout. The state took 25% of that amount and said, okay, we're going to take the first 25% and we're going to hand that as this money to municipalities to deal with those expenses listed. So that 1.3 million we got actually is our piece of the first 25% of the CARES money that was in that bill. Now, what the state is doing with the remainder has yet to be determined, right? And that's what I wanted to talk to Pooja about, right? Because the reality is there are things like this technology grant program they were talking about. Well, I was going to ask her, is that funded from this? Is that additional money from the CARES Act that the state's going to take and make a $25 million technology grant fund? Same with the $225 per student. Is that a separate piece of legislation, or is that Massachusetts saying we're going to pay from that 2.7 billion, we're going to pay 220? So I'm trying to get clarity on just understanding what money's coming from where and because where it comes from determines what we can use it for. So hopefully
225, what 225 is not. We have no say. I mean, that's going right to the schools.
Right, but even that was not clear. If the state turns around and says we're going to take this part of this, another part of this 2.7 billion, and we're going to give 225 per student to the schools, right? The question is it going to go to the schools, or is it going to be like the CARES money where they just write a check and say, okay, here, Holliston, here's your share, and it's obligated to go to the schools, but it comes through us, or does it go directly to them? That's what we're trying to get a handle on, because if it is something where there's money that is not directly conveyed to the schools, for example, we might have to reconsider what we do with their budget. If it's something where they say, okay, we're getting this payment of, whatever it is, 600 something thousand, I think is what it works out to be for Holliston. If that has to come through the town to the schools, then we might have to appropriate it to the schools. I just want to make sure we have that all set. We don't need it now, right? But it's something I want to make sure we have before town meeting for the reason we've discussed before, which is, if it ends up requiring town meeting action, we got to make sure it happens on July 20th, so.
And just an update, I've been watching sort of, Washington a little bit on all their timing and stuff. And I guess there's going to be a small window in late July and early August where the Senate's going to be in session. Mm-hmm. And they're going to try to do something. I saw today that Trump would support up to $1 trillion next round, and so something's going to happen, but the question is sort of what's in that and there's a lot of uncertainty around that even. So it's not going to be until August at some point until we have any idea what there's going on. So I wouldn't anticipate a real final state budget until.
Oh yeah, and I don't think we're going to have that. I don't think we're going to have that, and I think that's why we planned the budget we did. Right? I think that I certainly myself feel that this is a pretty decent budget given what we know now. We hopefully are yes, there's always the economy falls off the cliff in a second wave or something. Yes, then we have to reevaluate where we are. But I'm saying, like, if we manage to not take a significant downturn economically from here, then I think this budget will get us through. So
I agree.
Okay, so let's move on to job number 2, which is the warrant. And everybody should have gotten a copy of the warrant, the updated warrant from Mr. Ritter.
Yeah, can I just ask, Ken? Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry to be a pain, but my warrant has Mr. Marsden's name in it throughout.
Yes.
And so was that, and it has last year 2019's date throughout?
No, you're looking at.
You're looking at the motions.
You're looking at the motions.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the motions. And by the way, I already, I have the finance team meeting before this one. I did point that out to Jeff. Jeff kind of said, I sent out the motions. And I said, well, Jeff, this came up in the consent agenda conversation when I said, what's the consent agenda going to look like? And he said, it's in the motions I sent out. And I said, no, it's not. The motions you sent out had 2018 and 2019 and Mr. Marsden all over it. And he kind of said, I must have sent out the wrong one. So he promised a new one, a new set of motions tomorrow morning. Remember, his last day, I believe.
The one he sent out, though, it said 7-7 on it. So the issue that I just sort of like to have us address, at least, is that we're now going to have to be voting on articles that we don't know if they're the final ones or not.
No, the draft he circulated today, right?
What time?
This morning. It was. Let me see.
Early, 8 o'clock.
7:27.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is supposed to be the final warrant. Okay. The consent agenda thing is a procedural matter. That doesn't change the warrant. What I wanted to point out to everybody was last week we added the rail trail money, and we added the facilities manager, not facilities manager, the sustainability coordinator to our budget, to the omnibus. We added so we had requested that they pull that, and they did. They pulled the revolving fund. They pulled the rail trail article. They also changed that road acceptance to not say retroactive. So those changes were made.
They pulled 24, or formerly known as 24.
Yes, there is an error in the numbering, and that there's no Article 23 because they pulled that. I have not checked the other articles to see when they pulled the other. I'm looking now. It doesn't look like anything else got skipped. 21, 22, 24. Yeah. So yeah, it's just Article 24 that needs to be renumbered to 23.
Do we want to go over which articles we feel comfortable being part of the consent agenda? I know it's not our decision, but
Well, what I would say is this. We voted some recommendations. Now, we have to vote the rest of the recommendations. And then from my perspective, anything we have recommended favorable action on is something we'd be fine on a consent agenda for, right? If we said, okay, we're fine with this article, the ones we are not fine with we would not want them in a consent. I mean, that to me, we don't have to discuss what do we want on a consent agenda. We can say, okay, anything we voted favorable action on, we're fine with being
action on Article 5, I believe, or do we not vote on Article 5 yet?
I don't believe we voted on Article 5 last week.
Okay.
And
Article 4, we did not vote.
Let me know if we got to make sure we've got to vote on every article that's financial. So if we miss one, just double check against last week to make sure we've got it covered as we go here. Okay. So, okay. So we voted, I believe. So Mark, tell me, what was the first one we didn't vote? We had 1, 2, 3.
We didn't actually vote on one, but there was said that no recommendation.
There's no financial aspect, yeah.
The next one we didn't vote on was 5.
Okay. So 4 we voted on, but we had our modified thing.
4 should not be part of the consent agenda.
4 definitely should not. And I already conveyed to the select board and the town moderator that 4 and 5.
I want to do this publicly, though.
Okay, good.
I just want to state our opinion publicly.
On 4 or 5?
Well, 4, just saying that we shouldn't be part of a consent agenda.
Okay.
We don't have to rehash the discussion we had last week, but just.
Yes. Okay. I thought there was something additional you wanted to say.
No.
Okay. So 4, we don't need to revote, but we don't want that to be part of consent agenda. That's true. 5, we did not vote. This should be, I should have asked Mary, damn it. Let's see. I think this is the right table. Let me check. Let me just quickly check to see. if the table is the same. The key thing is just the first table will tell you if it's the right stuff. Let me just double check. Check an earlier version because this is going to try to find an earlier version just to, okay, here's the draft from 6:30. Let me see if this
Ken have his hand up for this, or is it something else?
Was for something else, not regarding, it was just capital. You still have the 12,000, so it's got to go.
Yes, okay, well, we'll get there. I'm going to go through the warrant one by one again. We're just going to vote the things we need to vote, and we're going to, so when we get there, then we'll pull that out, because obviously we're going to pull that out based on what we just did. So, okay, so the only thing is I'm not convinced that this is the right table. I should have asked Mary. I forgot to ask her that, because I'm not sure. I think it is, because I remember she told me that the rate for a clerk was $18, and I see that in the thing here is $18. So it might be the right one. But if we're not sure on 5, for going to press purposes, until I confirm with Mary, we can just we'll make a recommendation at town meeting.
So this is the same one as with as a 6:30 draft that I thought.
That's what I'm noticing. That's why I'm
right.
wondering if it's right.
And I thought the select board last week said that was wrong. The one that they were looking at last week was wrong. So
yeah. So from my perspective, without an answer, our vote tonight should be we'll make a recommendation at town meeting for Article 5.
Okay, but before we sort of do that and move on, I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at this, but I want to draw everyone's attention to it.
Yep. Go ahead.
So if you go down below the job and wage classification plan, the managerial plan, there's a min and max table for the M2 through M6. Does everyone see that?
Yes.
This draft updated the M5 and the M6 min and max. Previous to this and all other forms of the warrant that I've seen, dating back to at least April, the min for M5 was 117,316 with a max of 161,270 and a midpoint of 143,687 versus 155 now at the midpoint, which is an 8% increase. For the M6, it was 125,824 to 170,220 with a midpoint of 148,022, and it's currently at 165 at the midpoint for an increase of 11% for just this. Now, I recognize that this alone does not set the does not have any budgetary impact, immediate budgetary impact. But it is what the select board will be using to set wages for managers going forward, and it's a little bit frustrating that this is happening at the last minute. I don't even think actually the select board has discussed this yet. This was just part of it, so I don't know. Maybe the numbers are wrong. The max looks for M5 and M6 being the same. It's kind of funky to me. But my concern and what I'd like to sort of hear about from the select board is, they went through a whole process last year of doing research, trying to figure out, where the salary ranges should be and setting them. And then, within a year, we're now making a pretty substantial change to the top, the top classifications.
Well, top 2, yeah.
The top 2, and it just so happens that it's right after we agreed to a contract with the new town administrator, and I don't know how that factored in. I mean, it's I don't know if I don't really believe too much in coincidences, but maybe it's coincidental that the midpoint happens to be the new salary for the town administrator. But it feels like because we were told that the whole adjustments and the whole situation that was done based on a lot of research and work. They set these ranges, they did all of this work, and then it's just kind of being thrown out maybe at the last minute. So I'm just trying to, I don't know, and that's part of where sort of everything is stemming from. I don't know what's going on here and why we're seeing this at the last minute, why the select board themselves all the select board anyway, because I'm sure at least one of them has had part in these changes. Why they're just going to be debating this at the last minute, right before they sign the warrant. But it would be helpful to have a little bit more information. So I guess it may be good that we don't make a recommendation until town meeting. But
Okay, Suzanne?
Well, I was curious as to when and how these got in then.
You mean the changes he's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, if they haven't debated them or talked about them, how did they get in? Who put
That's a
them
good
in?
question. That's a good question. Mr. Murphy, do you have an answer to that? Is that why you're
I do
raising your hand?
not.
Okay.
I know.
Oh.
No idea.
Okay. Yeah, so that's, let me put that on my list of things to follow up on. Well,
I mean, I can understand why the admin town administrator went up, that M6, but I don't see why the M5 would have increased.
right, and I will say that I'll tell you right now that there are a couple of procedural things here, right? One is that I can all but guarantee you that, yes, the M6 changed in response to the new town administrator, partly because the town administrator was not included. This is, I don't want to speak for the select board. They can answer themselves, but I think that the answer you're going to get is the town administrator is not included in the last round. That was one of the things I had mentioned at one of our earlier meetings when I said, when we were talking about the magnitude of the increases in the budget that was given and how they exceeded the budget that we had approved. What's often lost in that discussion is that the increases they implemented ended up covering fewer people than it was originally intended to. So they exceeded the budget by covered less people. So that's why I said I suspect that the answer is going to be the town administrator was not included in those adjustments. They made those adjustments now. Now, the second part of that question, and I agree with you on this, Dan, is that should be a data-driven decision, not you hire somebody and then set it based on what you agree to the salary with them, right? So we never
saw the original data.
Yeah.
And we haven't certainly seen any data to support these changes. Now, all I'm saying is, if the town administrator wasn't part of it, as you pointed out, and look, these decisions are the purview of the select board, though obviously they flow through to us because it comes out as requests for funding, which we need to recommend to town meeting.
Yeah.
But why set the town administrator's ranges at all then if at that point? I mean, and granted, I don't remember. I was actually going back and trying to find the exact thing that was voted on in May. I don't think these ranges were part of it, so I don't think town meeting has actually voted on this yet.
The town meeting has not voted on any of the managerial stuff.
It's just taken so long that this has been sitting in front of us for forever. So it feels like maybe they didn't. And so it's certainly something that the select board has purview to change. But it strikes me as well. It's frustrating that's happening at the last minute. And I would say to Vin's point, I don't think that if they had set these because they were using data-based decision making, that they should then change based upon what they decide to pay the town administrator, given that what they decided to pay was within the range that they had set. So just, make that and go forward and explain to the town why you thought he was, why paying the pay was at the upper end of the range, and then in future years make adjustments for whatever.
Right. Okay, Sue?
Yeah, I was just curious why the top two upper ranges were the same. Usually there's a differential between the top, between the
the range, only the top is the same.
What's that? Only, right, the max, but still the other maxes are not the same. And I just don't understand why the top part of the range would be exactly the same between an M5 and an M6.
Yeah.
I think we need some clarity. So I would agree with Dan. I don't think we should vote tonight on this one. I think we need more information.
We'll vote to make a recommendation at town meeting.
Yeah, you've read. Sorry. Agreed.
Mr. Murphy, do you have a question? I know you're not available video-wise, but you had your hand up, so I just want to check. Okay, maybe you stepped away for a second. Okay, we should vote him clerk while he's gone. No, but the other thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. We know that article is going to have some discussion at town meeting. But the one thing I will point out is where I've been struggling, and I kind of mentioned this way back at the beginning of this whole process when they were talking about do we want to do salary ranges? And I kind of said, I'm not sure I feel, I don't like the idea of a department head being on like a kind of a step type thing where you get paid and, it just automatically changes. No, these are people that are in what I, quote unquote, the more professional positions where there should be a performance component. You should have a range of pay, but it shouldn't be an automatic, right? You should, so what I'm struggling with on that particular chart is why we even need it, right? If internally the select board said we compile data and we have in our mind, we go out and here's our data that says we think that this is what town administrators get paid, this is what, whatever these positions get paid, here's what we think our range should be for these positions. But they're negotiating contracts with these people, right? They're giving them employment contracts. So I'm not quite sure what the point of the whole range is. Is it to say, we're just publicizing the town, this is what we pay? But then that's kind of a meaningless statistic because that range is going to get adjusted with inflation every year, presumably. And like in the case of the town administrator, you're just going to either bump them up higher or bump them up, why not just say, okay, we've looked at the data and this is what town administrators get paid, the low is this, the high is this, whatever. And then we just negotiate a contract somewhere in there and then justify, okay, we gave this guy above median because he was doing great, or we gave him below because he was new and that didn't have much. I mean, it's, I'm not sure what the purpose of publishing the table is necessarily.
Private companies do it all the time, and it's to ensure competitive wages.
But it's for internal use, is my point.
True, but it's hard to convey what a private, all salaries for a private company are also for internal use only, right? And unlike us, they don't have to publish them. These are all sort of published. I think maybe to some degree, I don't think it's horrible. It's just sort of.
No, I don't think it's horrible.
It's to line up sort of and say, hey, you're paying this person X, which is within sort of where on your range. The problem is if you're changing your ranges all the time to fit the numbers, then that doesn't really.
That's exactly my point. I'm saying if you're negotiating a contract with each individual and then you negotiate the contract, come to an amount, and then say, okay, that's now our midpoint, and we do some plus or minus on that, and that's our range, then the range is useless. That's my point.
As Mr. Marsden used to say, this is the pay for the job that we have, and so it doesn't necessarily mean we change it all the time. My kind of concern was that we were sort of told that all these managerial pay changes were done based upon sort of lots of fact data and stuff like that, and we haven't seen any of that, and it seems like then they're still changing the numbers. The data cannot have changed substantially, from back then as well. So I think it'd be important to see the data.
Yep, duly noted. Okay, so given that we've now established that we're not going to make a recommendation tonight, I'll entertain a motion that our recommendation is that we make a recommendation at town meeting for Article 5.
So,
do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
yes.
Ms. Emer?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And I vote aye. Okay, so now let's go on to Article, let's see, what do we have next? So what's the next one we didn't do?
Next one that we didn't talk about was 10.
Okay, and that was, okay, hold it. That might not be 10 anymore. So we did the income, we voted on the income requirements. It was 10 in the old warrant, right? So we have right now it's the revolving fund spending limits. Did we have was that the one? Let me just double check the 631.
Yeah, we were wanting to understand whether or not these were the same as last year or if any had changed.
Okay, that's right. Okay, hang on a second. I have that. I did go and get that. Hang on, let me just pull up that. I did go look at that. Here it is.
Just for the record, Jay Tellerman has suggested 6, 7, 8, and 9 be considered for the consent agenda, and we voted for all those, so I don't have a problem with any of those.
Okay. Okay, so let me find. Okay, here we go. So I have the limits from last year, and I will read them. If somebody wants to verify them against what we have there, I think
I'm reading. I'm looking.
Okay, so it's wetlands 40,000.
Same.
COA 5,000.
Same.
Composting kit 3,000.
I'll just keep going, and if they're not the same, I'll say not.
Okay. Response and recovery 25K. A butters list 5,000. Building inspection 100,000. Town hall rental, 25,000. Senior center van, 10,000. AgCom, 10,000. Sealer, 5,000. Bulb recycling, 3,000. Banner, 5,000. Accident fee, 5,000. Inoculation, 20,000. Cost of prosecution, 30,000. Nutrition, 10,000. And there's one in here which Pinecrest, 200,000. And technology repair and replenish, 75,000.
Those are all the same.
Okay, so it is all the same then. Because that was right from last year's report.
So I make a motion for favorable action on Article 10 revolving fund spending limits as presented.
Second.
Okay, let me just get to this right spot again. So I'm making sure that I'm okay. Okay, any further discussion on that?
Is town hall able to be rented now? I know
No.
they had the issue with the septic.
I
Do
don't
we-
believe the
do
septic
we-
issue has been resolved yet.
Do we care or does it matter?
I don't care.
Okay,
At
The
this
only reason I
point,
don't
no.
care is because at some point the septic will get fixed and then it'll be rented again and, so. Of
Just
course,
didn't know if it tied it up.
COVID may prevent it from being rented again, even if we fix the septic,
Right.
so,
Forever.
yeah. So, okay, so yes, Mr. Whitaker.
I have probably a silly question and just showed my naivete here, but Pinecrest Golf Course, 200,000. Do we make money on that? I mean, what?
Yes. Yes and
Define
no.
make money. I mean,
Yes, define make money.
All right. Do we not lose money? Is that, I mean, like, did that 200 get recouped, or is it like, I
Yeah,
guess,
the Pinecrest, obviously the town owns the course. There's a management company that runs the golf course, and there's another catering, I don't want to say catering, it's like food service, it runs the food service there. Okay? The town receives, it depends on the contracts it's negotiated with the different vendors. The management company for the course traditionally pays a fixed fee per year plus a percentage above some certain amount of the revenue from the course. So if we have a really good year at the golf course, we make more money. Okay. Same with the food. There's some fixed percentage that we get of the food sales, things like that. That 200,000 is basically the revolving fund that's used to fund those operations, so to speak, which is they collect revenue from the kitchen and then they may need to buy new kitchen equipment or they need to buy things for the kitchen. Or that's why it's got a higher limit, by the way, because it deals with that kind of stuff.
Mr. Give me my mark. This is not this is not like spending. This is the amount that they can go up to spending in the account from receipts that they take. It's not town
Right.
operating money. So it's not like they necessarily even have to spend it all, or we do spend it all every year.
That's right. If they don't have the money, they can't spend it.
And they,
So, Mr. Murphy.
Yes, I'm okay with having it this year, the 200,000, but next year we should look at lowering it. I asked Sharon this question. I said, why do we have that much considering we only have 60,000 in debt payments? Why do we have to keep going and keeping it? She replied, there's a lot of 60,000 for the lease, but also there's renovations going on at Anthony's on the Green. I would
Right.
suggest we come back and think about this. And this next year I don't think we need to have 200. Just because the reason it went up so much was because of debt service. I remember the discussion. It was
Yeah.
like my first year on the board or committee, and then that's why we put it up to 200. It was a lot of questioning. Well, that seems like a lot. So now that they don't have any debt, I don't think it should be 200. But let's leave it out because it's not worth discussing now. But for next year, lowering it.
Okay. Okay. I noted that in my notes here from this. So Suzanne?
yeah, sorry, one last question, and sorry if it's a stupid question, but we don't have to have Park and Rec in here?
No, Park
as a
and Rec.
revolving fund?
The Park and Rec revolving fund is covered by separate statute. It's not a 53.5 revolving fund.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing them. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know why, but there's actually a separate statute that covers Parks and Rec revolving funds. So
But the town doesn't have to ever vote on that.
that is correct. The town, it's one of those quirks of state law where there's like a law that governs park commissions, and in there it says they can have a revolving fund to pay for blah, blah. So they have a whole different set of requirements than 53.5.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, any other objection or any other comment on the motion? Okay, then hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Ms. Emer?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so we've got a recommendation for that article. Too many windows here. Okay, so what was the next one? We obviously, hopefully you voted 11. We just did that already. So what did we do? Did we vote 12 last week, Mark?
No.
The capital expenditure fund?
True. So what I have is I had 10 we held off, 11 we held off, and then
Oh,
12.
we did hold on 11. Okay. The
Right.
omnibus? Okay. So
No, we voted. Yeah, I think that
that, okay, let me check the,
we just did it earlier.
no, I know, but I'm just saying that he said, okay, so we held, okay, so what was after that? Did we do 12 last week?
So I said I have 12 we did vote.
Okay, but we have to revote that because we changed the amount.
Did we vote?
Okay.
I don't remember. Do I look in the notes?
Well, see, at some point the numbering is going to change. That's why I got to pull up. Hold on a second. I gotta pull this up.
Change it to way towards the bottom. I
Okay,
thought.
hold on 1 second here. I'm just going to change it so I can see last week's.
12 was wrong because the motion was for favorable action for 12,
Okay.
and this would have had a number in it.
That's what I'm saying. So let me pull up the 630 warrant and make sure we get the numbering right going forward here. I knew at some point it was going to, they're going to diverge. So,
It might be at 16. My notes say to remove 16. It's the first time I have to remove.
okay, so 12.
Oh, Ken, we do need though on the omnibus to vote to for favorable action
Yes.
to take 400,000 out of stabilization.
Yes. Okay, so we'll do that. Let's see. So 12, yeah, 12 was the same last week. Okay, so that's fine. We'll fix it. So for 11, okay, so Article 11, our motion, okay, this is going to be, you got to be ready for this, Mark. This is going to be a tricky one, okay? Our motion will be that the Finance Committee recommends favorable action on the amounts listed in the omnibus, but the recommended column of the omnibus budget, okay? That the town recommends that the town raise and appropriate, and I'll get the exact sum. Well, actually, let me rephrase it to make it easier. Say that the town appropriate $400,000 from the stabilization fund and $200,000 from FY20 free cash, with the remainder being raised and appropriated according to the recommended column in the omnibus budget.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so the total.
You sure you don't want to do this? You sure you don't want to do this as two?
What?
You sure you don't want to do this as two, so we don't have to
So
tie
could-
the omnibus vote to 2/3?
Right, could this be a simple majority?
Well, hold it. First of all, Tim so moved. Did someone second it?
No, I so moved. Or
Oh, you so moved and Tim seconded it. I heard somebody, okay, I heard Tim say.
whatever.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're debating the thing, but we had gotten a second on the motion. Okay, so go ahead, Michelle.
Could this be a simple majority then?
No. Yeah,
No,
well,
for us, okay, let me explain. For our recommendation, obviously it's simple majority. For
Right, for
the
the town meeting.
town meeting, that recommendation would require a 2/3 vote, okay? If we could also do it as two motions, right? Have one motion that says raise and appropriate the sum amount and the 200,000 from free cash, okay? That could be a majority vote. And then you have a second motion that says appropriate 400,000 to fund this. That's a 2/3 vote. The stabilization has to be a 2/3 vote.
I would
Now,
agree with Dan that we separate it, have two motions.
well, just to be clear, Vin, that doesn't change what we just recommended. Our recommendation is the same. This goes into how the motions are written.
I just think that we should have the motion be two motions. I don't want to have the omnibus be subject to a 2/3 vote. That's.
Yep.
I don't think that it'll come close, but I just don't want to leave any of that to chance.
Okay, and that's fine. And I can when I see the next draft of I have to revise the motions, as they're, so when I see my next draft of the motions, which I'm supposed to be getting tomorrow, I will suggest that we do it in that manner. The other thing I was going to say was, we also, if there's concern that a 2/3 vote for the omnibus would not be achievable, then I think we have to be prepared to what would we do? In other words, if the town said, we don't want to take anything out of stabilization, right? Then the question becomes, what do we do? Do we whack the reserve fund? What do we do? Go ahead, Mr. Murphy. Because we'd have to adjust 400,000 on the fly.
Yep, that's what I would suggest. Whacking the reserve fund. And it is what it is, but that's tell them that.
Or some capital, some reserve,
Yeah.
or something.
Okay.
Highly unlikely it will happen, but I think from logistics standpoint, you should do it because I can see it being a problem. Well, we need to have a 2/3 vote. Well, that's a simple majority. Bill will be a stickler on this, so you know that.
Oh, no. The real question is, do you think it makes, I personally hope that it doesn't make a difference, right? That if we present the omnibus the right way, that the town would say, okay, yeah, we understand that this is our political blueprint and go forth.
For transparency, making sure people are voting on taking money out of stabilization, I also think is a good.
And that's fine too. That's why I said, I'm fine either way. I'm just saying that I don't look at it. I'm hoping that they've been following the process. They see what we've done. They can look at this ahead of time. No, seriously. There are people that show up at town meeting. Actually, some of them that come actually do look at this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So my hope is that if they have a question about that and they're saying, why are we doing this? That they come to us ahead of time. They can email any one of us and we'll say, this is how we came up with the blueprint and this is our intention. Go ahead, Ms. Emer.
But the vote at town meeting is by department. Is it going to be one vote for the omnibus?
It's going to be one vote, right? It's going to be, that's going to be part, remember we did that last year. We streamlined it so we don't have to vote every budget.
Much better.
So.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be that way this year too.
Okay, go ahead, Sue.
Just a question on, you asked what would we do on the fly. I mean, could we also recommend that there's a compensation reduction as well across the board, and that's how you accommodate it? We
could recommend anything. I mean, that's what I'm saying. But if we do that, we'd have to, if that's something we want to consider, and even if it's, well, let me put it this way, if it's something we want to have available to us, okay, then what I can do is I can talk to Mary as the overseer of all things payroll, right? And say to her, what would be the percentage pay cut required to cut the payroll by $400,000? And then if that's the case, if hypothetically we get in the situation and somebody says, okay, we just implement 400,000 in pay reductions, right? Then we can say, okay, that requires you, whatever. I'm making up a number. This is no way based on fact, but let's say it was 2% or something like that, right? Then we could just sit there and say, okay, well then we'll eliminate the stabilization fund and just say it's a we just pass a motion that says reducing all salary lines in the budgets by 2%. And we know that gets us the money. So go ahead, Mr. Alfred.
Here's my only issue with that is that it would impact the town. I mean, because we wouldn't be able to do it for collective bargaining units. So you'd end up with, essentially you'd end up with layoffs. And especially if we were to, it'd be a lot, I mean, it's going to hit the schools, right? Disproportionately. I think that certainly let's look at it, but I think certainly we could roll back the managerial salary adjustment piece. That's $22,000. Yeah. That's part of it.
Well, that's $100,000 right there. So.
That was my other question.
The whole thing we could do.
Well, no, I'm saying if you rolled them back to what was, yeah. I mean, whatever.
Well, I was thinking the year-over-year increase.
Yeah.
I was thinking the year-over-year increase, but look, I mean, but at the same time, maybe it should be draconian to sort of save us, because if the town doesn't want to use the stabilization, then.
Well, I'm seeing compensation. Either people are losing their jobs or they're getting compensation adjustments downward at this point, and we're actually not doing that. But if we don't have the funds, if we don't get the votes, then that's an option that we're seeing in other places. So I just think it's something I agree. I hear what you're saying around the club.
The majority of the impact would be layoffs because we couldn't do adjustments to those employees. Well, either you don't include employees who are part of a collective bargaining agreement, in which case it disproportionately hurts all the non-collective bargaining unit employees.
Yeah.
Well, couldn't it be on compensation?
Them, but they're not actually.
Right. Couldn't we leave it up to the departments to figure out how they're going to make it. It just goes across the board. And if they have
Well-
collective bargaining, they need to figure it out.
Well, see, that's the problem. That's why I said we need to have the legwork done in advance. In other words, we have to pass an appropriation for every department. So that's exactly why I said earlier, if I went to Mary and said, what's the total town payroll, union, non-union, everybody, and then said, okay, if we wanted to lop that by 400 grand, what percentage is that, right? Then you could go through and pass, you could say at town meeting, okay, the every budget is adjusted, every salary line and every budget is adjusted downward by whatever that percentage is, X percent, right? Then you have a number for every department. And then to the extent that department heads, move things around within their personnel services budget, that's their prerogative. But then you've squeezed out $400,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why I said we just have to know what that number is, and then just say, and then we don't have to sit there and say, okay, this person gets a pay cut, this person gets this, or this person gets laid off. Then it is up to the departments, but each department has to have a number. So,
all right, well, let's get the numbers and have it as a backup. I really hope we don't have to use it.
I really hope we don't have to use it too. But
Agreed.
Ms. Emer.
I was going to say, you can do something like close town hall on Fridays, but if you do, or pick some random day, but if you do that, it's not going to affect the big budgets because the schools aren't going to close the day. The police department isn't going to cut their budgets. You know what I mean? So it's something like that wouldn't work.
Well, you'd have to do what we said, right? You'd have to do it as
It'd just be across the
general
board.
across the board reduction,
Right.
and say, which is what some companies do, right? The CEO sits there and the CFO looks at the numbers and says, okay, every department gets whacked 5% because we don't have the revenue to support this budget, right? And then it's go figure it out on your own. But this is what you get. But obviously our hope is that we have done a good enough job and have, we can convey to the town well enough that this is something that is why we have the stabilization fund, and that's why we're limiting the withdrawal, and we have every intention of restoring that, and so forth and so on. So okay, so we have the motion on the floor to make the recommendation. This was 12, or we were talking. Okay,
11.
11, right? So any further discussion on this? So I'll make a note to get the payroll number. Okay. Any further discussion on this motion, this recommendation? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Yes. You looked, okay. Ms. Emer?
Sorry, what?
Yes.
You looked like it was a puzzled yes vote. Mr. Whitaker?
Well, because I'm
yes,
voting
don't
no.
worry. I know what you're thinking about, but I'll tell you how we're going to.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. And Mr. Alfred, just for the record, the recommendation will also include the votes that we took on the individual budgets. So your objections will be noted in our recommendation there. So we'll have the recommendation.
It's a really long recommendation.
What?
It's gonna be a really long recommendation.
It is, but we've had that before. We've been there, as you know, we've had people that voted no on certain things.
Filling the bill roll.
Yes. Okay, so Article 12, you said we did or did not vote on that? We did vote on that last week, right, Mark?
It passed 6-0-1.
Okay, so for 12, we want a motion to reconsider because we're going to want to change the amount.
I don't know how we voted on that without an amount.
Yeah, what was the amount we voted last week? That should have been a recommendation with an amount.
Hang on one second.
That's why I'm confused.
Hey, he's new. Give the guy a break.
Well, he wrote everything else down.
I know. That's right. He wrote what brand my tea was, right? Now
It's yeah, you have what's it called? Twinings, Earl Grey.
So, because the recommendation for Article 12 should have been that the town raise and appropriate 1.5 million. That's what it should have been last week.
But that's not in there now either.
What do you mean? Are you looking at the motions again?
No, I'm looking at the warrant.
Not in the warrant right now.
It's not in the warrant.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it did not, what we voted last week did not have a number
The
associated with it.
motion to reconsider Article 12 with the
Okay,
capital
yeah.
expenditures,
Yes.
transfer to the capital expenditure fund.
Okay, so any debate on the motion to reconsider? Hearing none, Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Sessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so the motion for this will want to be, according to our spreadsheet, that the town, let me get the number here, raise and appropriate, oh, you know, I just realized we're actually, shoot. Okay, let's do this one right and we'll fix the other one. The motion should be that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $1,425,000 and appropriate $88,000 from FY20 free cash for the capital expenditure fund.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy. Got to unmute first.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. What I realized is the motion for Article 11, we need to reconsider that and change it. And now the good thing is we don't have to vote to reconsider because we passed it within the last 15 minutes. So, or the last 45 minutes or whatever it is, right? So we just need to vote to amend our prior vote to say that we use 112,000 from free cash, not 200.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so now we got it all straight. Okay. So let's see, what do we have next? So you said 16 was when it starts changing. So, okay, so now Article 13.
Wait. Yes.
Yep. What'd you say, Dan?
Just 13. We need to take out the 12,000.
Yes. So I don't believe we voted. Did we vote it last week, Mark?
We did not know.
Okay, I was gonna say, I didn't think we voted this one. So our recommendation would be that the town appropriate $125,000 for the Miller School roof, $500,000 for committee and field replacement, $122,214 for school technology, $8,600 for 1750 Washington Street improvements, and $283,020 for radio interoperability improvements from the capital expenditure fund.
So moved.
For a total of $1,038,834.
Okay, there you go. Put that in too, Mark.
Ken, are you gonna, this is Tina Hine. Are you going to take comments on this before you guys vote?
If you want, if you have something to say, sure.
If you don't mind, yeah. So I told my board and also the school committee in open meeting that I would save my questions, comments for discussion on this article. So I hope my timing's okay here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I have a question about the $500,000 for committee and field.
Mm-hmm.
So there's in one of your memos, I can't remember if it's the press release to the public or if it was internally to the department heads, but your recommendation was that capital requests should be public safety requests only.
No, that's not what we.
No.
We said that they were. Oh, I had it up and.
I'll wait till Dan finds it since he had it there.
Fancy.
You want, I was gonna say, do you need to find it? Do I have to go back? And find
No, just give me 2 seconds. I got it. So we said defer non-essential capital request was the.
Okay, so Okay, so I just want to check in on the consistency of decision making. Do you feel as a committee that other departments took that direction too far or appropriately in pulling back the requests that they originally had for capital?
No other department.
So I'm thinking of.
No other department came to us and asked us for guidance on what we thought, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it was certainly an earlier warrant, but fair enough, right? So the DPW did not come forward with their request for, I think it's a dual something tractor, and the select board did not present their request for studies to the finance committee. But I would say that they did not do that in large part because of the guidance received by the finance committee. So I'm just wondering where the finance committee is willing to consider committee and field as, I'm not sure if you classify it as essential or non-essential, and if you feel that other departments took appropriate steps in pulling back their capital requests.
Well, it's tough for us to know that, Tina, because they didn't come to us, right? We gave them the guidance, and it was, if in their discretion it was something they didn't need, then it wasn't put forward as a request. Now, I know that in the case of committee, and I want to make a specific comment about that, because that's I know what you're, obviously you've said that's what your concern is, right? According
sure,
to
I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. According to our own capital replacement plan, Comedian was due to be replaced this year, this summer, okay? So it would have been up for replacement. It's past its useful life. It is something that was on the asset management spreadsheet. The issue was, of course, we didn't get a town meeting in May. We had the pandemic. So we missed the opportunity to have it replaced right now, right? Well, right this time of year. The concern, and this is something that we had a discussion with the school committee budget subcommittee about this. We are in a situation now where we cannot be certain when the next town meeting will be. Now, we obviously hope it's October, but it may push to, January, it may push to whatever, depending on how the pandemic unfolds. Maybe it takes till next May to do it, right? If the pandemic, one thing that we worked very hard as a town to be disciplined financially. And now that we're in this situation, we have the opportunity to use our fiscal strength to save ourselves money. And the example I always give people is Warren Buffett makes investments when the market's tanking because he's the guy with the money. So he can buy things cheap while everybody's panicked. And then when they go back to quote unquote normal prices, he's already made 2 or 3x his money because he bought when everybody else couldn't afford to. In this particular case with Comedian, we know from prior work that Keith did that we can get a discount on Comedian Field of about, close to 10%, like it's 8 or 9% or something. $40,000, I think is what they quoted him. Okay. Because right now, the business is not doing that well, obviously, because every other town is suffering financially just like we are, right? So to me, if Comedian did not need to be replaced in the next year or two, or, then yes, would I consider it non-essential? Yeah, I wouldn't. But given that we're going to pay for this field regardless in the very near future, it makes no sense for us to wait until every other community is looking for that service and the prices are going up again, when we have the opportunity to get a discount price while everybody else is busy trying to balance their budgets. So that's why we told them to go forward with it.
Okay, if I follow your logic, I hear you saying that we may not have October town meeting. Therefore, this moved in your mind to the July town meeting. Well, if I follow that logic further, then if we don't have a October town meeting, we probably don't have MIAA sanctioned sports this fall, which would push out the repairs for Comedian to what I think I hear you saying that other hypothetical.
That's exactly the opposite, Tina. I was just going to say it's not that town meeting may get pushed out. It's that if the pandemic, for example, let's say tomorrow or July 21st, right? MIA comes out and says, hey, the pandemic is showing signs of recurring. We're canceling all fall sports, right? By having this on the town meeting warrant for July 20th, the school committee could then sit there and say, hey, we can get this field done now while there's no sports in the fall. We'd actually discussed this with them and said, what happens if fall sports get canceled? And they said, we can do the field replacement while fall sports are canceled if we have the appropriation. And that's why we said we should do it. So,
okay, I
so
struggle to see how that's
reason,
essential, but
put us in the position to take advantage of it.
Okay, sure. I struggle to see how replacing a field when the kids can't play on it is essential, but I take your point. So the other piece I'm taking away from this is that if a capital project is on the capital improvement plan, that becomes a strong justification for the finance committee. So what you're saying is committee and field is on the capital improvement plan for the schools. That raises it to the level of being considered for this meeting.
Well, it still should be brought forward, but yes, if it's on the plan,
Okay.
it just, go ahead, Sue.
Well, no. Finish up with Tina. I had a question on the field as well, based on what we were
Okay.
discussing last
Okay.
week.
I thought it was
finish up.
something you wanted to comment to Tina on, but Michelle, okay.
No, but it's in this same. It's the same question on the field.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I raised similar questions that Tina had last week, and we got the same responses. I still am challenged with the amount, given the fact that we had gotten an updated, revised quote that Keith had. I think 440, if I remember correctly. And I apologize, I'm traveling. I don't have my notes with me, but that's a significant delta between what the revised number was back in April, and we still have to go back for a further revised amount. And I'm a little challenged with how high it is. It's the same number that they had originally requested. So
That's just flexibility because we don't know, and maybe when they're going to get it done and what the final number is going to be. And if they don't spend it, it goes right back in. So it's not like we're spending 500,000 and they're keeping the delta. So because we have ample,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I just, I
don't know. I'm less okay to spend the 500 today, if that's the number. If it's less, I'm okay to actually move it forward, because I would agree right now it's not a critical spend item, but to me it becomes more critical if we can get a significant discount.
Right.
And to that end, I think that's a great point Sue raises. And to that, I would hope that the departments like DPW were given the opportunity to request a new quote. We're given that advice, I should say. I know they had the opportunity, but I hope they were given the advice to request new quotes as well, because there's likelihood their items could have come in less, given everyone's spending less, so people are anxious to make those sales. But
I just want to say, Tina, if I could just, we meet with the schools every week, and it kind of came up as part of our overall sort of just discussions with them. They kind of,
Sure.
do the back and forth. I mean, I would say that, you guys made assumptions, I guess, and not, and so I think we all need to sort of work better on is just sort of the communication, because as you guys come to say, hey, what do you really mean by essential? Then maybe we could have had that conversation a while ago, rather than, I appreciate what
Sure.
you did by trying to cut down your request. I think that your heart and your actions are sort of in the right place. And I'm sorry that you feel like there's been any kind of disparity between sort of your requests and your recommendations.
No, I don't actually say that. I just am trying to understand the way the decisions are made.
Okay, but I'm just saying your goal and what the select board did with the capital request, I think was in the right sort of vein. I think maybe just in the future we'll have some more. Hopefully we won't have to go through this again. So maybe this particular point we should just have more communication on that, so that everyone knows sort of exactly what we mean and what we think of as essential versus non-essential.
Well, the other thing too, Dan, is well,
Go
just
ahead,
one
Tina.
thing. Sorry, Tina. I was just going to add that the school committee did mention, or maybe it was Keith, that the field is getting to a point where it's in a shape where it could be not harmful, but it could cause harm at some point. Yes, thank you. And that's why they wanted to pursue moving it forward. They don't know exactly when that is, but it is within a sort of a time period. So
Yeah.
I think
Sure.
if DPW was looking at a truck that's going to break down and sort of die on the street, and I mean, that's,
Well, that's just a
sort of,
conversation
I would
we would
equate
have.
Right, and
Well,
then,
I can tell you, this is Tina again, I can tell you directly and personally that I supported Chief Stone in removing a $40,000 request for public safety equipment, given that guidance in the memo with traffic calming and signals for safer crosswalks and so on. We pulled that back off of the Capitol. So
Right.
it's a lesson learned. It's interesting. It's good to hear how you approach this. I'll carry it forward for October town meeting. So I'm all set with comments. I just wanted to get how you guys are approaching this, and I appreciate your comments.
Okay, I'll get you in a second, Michelle. I just wanted to, just one thing I wanted to mention before we move on is that's one reason, by the way, why the radio interoperability improvements, right? That's something that's considered essential for public safety. That's something that's, that's outside of the scope of, oh, well, we get a good deal, right? Because that's something that needs to happen from a public safety perspective. So we are in essence picking up that entire thing, because remember, that was originally supposed to be 100, some smaller amount, and the whole thing was moved forward because it was a public safety issue. So, so I'm just saying we do consider both the essential part of it, but also the timely part of it from as we outlined earlier. Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
I was just going to say what Sue was saying. To me, it was the continuum of the field now being safe, but going towards eventually not being safe, because the part of the field that's not eroding, but it's losing the absorbency. And as it's losing the absorbency, it's losing the ability to absorb the shock of the students who are running on it, who are being tackled on football. And it's going to reach the point where the injuries are going to be not dangerous, but it's going to reach a point where it is dangerous. And I think it's got to be replaced before it reaches that point. You don't want to wait until they start being injured. You want to replace it before it gets to that point. And to me, that is a matter of safety.
So.
And it's like the radio for the public safety. Now's the time to do it. And to me, the field, it's past the useful life. It's starting to lose pieces of I forgot what Keith called it, but it's starting to lose the pieces of someone help me.
Like that come apart, yeah. So
yeah, it's coming apart.
Right.
Sure, and
it's a matter of it's common sense. You replace it before the kids start getting injured.
Right.
Yeah, Michelle, it's a great point. I agree with you. And to that point, I would add also, we'll be presenting some information to the town that the injury rate for people who bike and walk in the town, what that is, what the goal should be is 0, of course, and the 17% that it was for 2019 and the 20% that it is for 2020 to date. So I think that's a great way to make decisions. So I don't disagree with anything that you're saying.
We can only make a decision on what's presented before us.
Right.
Sure. Got it. Understood.
Okay. So what do you want? So Suzanne, how do you want to the issue about the amount? I know that we did convey to Keith to go out and get a new quote. I just haven't gotten anything, and we're not going to meet with them until tomorrow. So what would you prefer we do if you don't want to? If you're not happy with that amount, we can always, keep in mind, by the way, this is what's going to go in the report, but we can always change it. If they come back with a quote and it's less, we can, on the floor of town meeting, say we revoted our recommendation to some lower amount.
Well, I thought the first quote they had was 480, and then the second quote they got was 440, and he was going to go out and get a new one. So Dan, to your point, if you need a delta in there, although I'm not crazy about that, but if we do feel we need a delta, I would prefer to lower it at least to the 480.
I hear you, and part of me agrees, but that was the request. I just don't.
I don't know. Let's see. I'm waiting for you to complete that sentence.
Yeah, I don't. frankly, I don't think the 500 versus 480 matters, because if they don't spend it, it comes back. And because we have we do have money in the capital expenditure fund now, that we're not scraping the barrel, that it's going to prohibit us from doing other things until they close out so I'd rather just do the 500 to have them have the flexibility. I don't.
Well, except that, once we vote it, then anyone that they're getting bids from understands that they have up to that amount.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Well, we can put it at 480 if you want, the only reason
can we leave it at 500 for now? Talk to the school committee, see how they would feel about that, and then
I'd also like to see if they got the new quote, right? If
they got the new quote, and then potentially change that at the meeting before town meeting. I'd be if we can talk with them just a little bit more, get a little bit more clarity from them. I'd be open to discussing reducing it at town meeting, or right before town meeting.
Or we could, will we meet again before town meeting? Will we?
Yes,
right?
We definitely will. We have to meet
away,
next
right?
Tuesday, even if it's only for 10 minutes, because we have to approve the line item transfer for the police department.
Okay.
So what do you want to do? You want to move forward voting with 500 and then adjust it? We'll talk to them tomorrow and make tell them we need.
That's the motion on the table right now too. So.
Yeah, that's fine. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
I do agree, and if we can, I just don't want to put anybody in. I don't want to get to a point where they have an opportunity to do it, and maybe something comes up that the price is better, but then there's something else that needs to be done. I don't know. I want to just have flexibility that isn't coming to be 485 or 490, and they.
So okay, so let's okay. So if we're going to leave it, we'll leave it at 500 for now. But I have it on my list already of things to get more data on, and if we get new information, we will change that prior to town meeting. Look, I'm all for not giving anybody any more money than they need. So okay. So any further debate on the motion for a recommendation for Article 12? Okay, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yeah.
Ms. Zemer? Take yourself off mute. I'll do it for you. I guess I can't do that. I guess you have to do it. There you go.
Is it 12 or 13?
Did I say 12 and it's 13 or what? It is 13. You're right. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, aye.
Okay. Mr. Whitaker?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
No.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Mr. Maxwell, do you want to explain your objection just for the point of anything I might need to note in the report?
I don't think it's anything you need to note in the report, and I'm hoping when we get the quote, we can adjust the number for committee and field, but the conversation reminded me of thoughts from last week when the school committee presented. I actually don't support $500,000 for committee and field when that would be the cost that we would pay at any other time of year. Why pay for it now? Why move this up to now? Why is this urgent unless we are saving?
Okay. I just want to know if there's something we failed to address. Yes, Mr. Whitaker.
I don't know if this is open for discussion here, but could we be held liable for lawsuits or anything like that due to injuries because of the field?
The answer when you're in government is yes, you could be held liable for anything.
Okay.
So to your point, if your question is if somebody hurts themselves on the field, now it doesn't mean they win, but could they sue? Absolutely. If somebody gets injured on the field, they could absolutely sue. Now, as I said, that doesn't mean they'll win, but yes, it can happen. So, and that's, by the way, one reason why you never throw around words like unsafe unless you're really sure, right? In other words, you don't sit there and say, oh, the field's unsafe, because, that's not the right thing to say unless you know for certain that there's a safety issue with the field.
It's not unsafe now.
That's right. It's not unsafe now. Okay. So, okay. So we have that. 14 we voted on, I believe, because that's just the allocation to the reserves, right? Correct, Mark?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Stabilization was indefinite postponement. I'm pretty sure we voted that.
Yes.
Okay. 16, which was the rail trail, is now gone. I'm trying to find. Okay, I had it. The fun. Oh, there it is. Okay, I was going to say I had the new one. I had the new one and the old one next to each other, so I could keep track of the different article numbers. So now, what is now 16 was 17. So the solar panels at the landfill. Did we vote that one?
We passed 7-0. Yep.
Okay, 17. Okay, so what was 18 last week? Did we do that one too?
18 and 19 we voted together, and they both
Okay.
had favorable action.
Okay, I'll say, so that's the community fire. Okay, then 20. The next one is what is now 19, which is the stabilization fund. Now, we had some questions last week. There are two things here, okay? One was about where do we get the 50,000 from, which could have been free cash, except we've now used that, so that's off the table. But the other question was, does it have to be a stabilization fund? Does it need to be special legislation? I think Mary sent it to everybody, but if you didn't, I'll just, for the public's sake, Mary did confirm, did the research and said that the setting it up as a stabilization fund under the stabilization fund statutes is totally fine, and that PRIT can accept investments. So if we choose to invest it similar to the OPEB trust, we can do that. Now, she did point out that realistically, that wouldn't happen until we got to an appreciable amount, right? You know, PRIT's not going to take a 50 grand investment or something like that. So we have to wait till there was some money in there. But we could do that. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Alfred.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this. I think that given that we're trying to skinny down the budget, the warrant as a whole, and the fact that I'm still a little confused about what exactly this does for us, and especially if 50,000 is not even going to be investable, that maybe we should really sort of suggest to the select board that they come back with a more sort of concrete, sort of larger plan on sort of maybe figuring out a better way to sort of fund this up quicker, get it invested quicker, just something. So my recommendation would be that we either request that the select board remove this from the warrant or vote for indefinite postponement.
Okay, so are you making that motion?
Well, we can do. Do you want to make the motion now and we'll discuss?
No, I'm just saying.
I don't know how people feel, so I didn't want to just make a motion.
Okay. So, Ms. Nersessian, you were next, I believe.
Yeah, I had thought we had talked about last week having this at 0. So to establishing the fund, but not putting the 50,000 in.
Correct.
I'm not sure. Did something happen that the 50,000 went in, or
no. I'll address that. And the basic thing with that is the two things I'll clarify. Right. The article says to transfer 50,000 into said fund. Right. But that could easily. The motion would say that the town, whatever, appropriate 50,000 from whatever. That motion could obviously be amended to say that we establish the fund and the money that goes into it is only the amount available in the retirement, county retirement budget line, meaning that whatever that rebate is for prepay, that's the only thing that could go in there. So we could work around the funding, okay? And that's what I was going to say, right? The whole idea of 50,000 at this point is off the table. We don't have 50,000. We just went through this whole exercise to get us to balance, right? So in that sense, we can't even consider recommending 50,000 for this because we don't have $50,000 to recommend, right? But what we can do is, as I said, if we were to set it up and just establish the fund, okay, without the funding, then I think Mary's intent and the select board's intent, I don't want to speak for them, but I would think that their intent would be that when they make the county retirement payment, instead of saying, okay, the discount or whatever that extra we get for prepaying our yearly assessment, that instead of having that just be applied to our outstanding liability, that money would then just come back to the town as usual, and that would go into this fund.
But then that money wouldn't be invested because it's not staying with them. And if it's too small money to sort of set up a separate account with PRIT, I mean, I'm just saying, I think that we should think about that. We should sort of, I would just think that we should just hold off and see if we can kind of
okay, well, let me finish going around the hands here. Mr. Murphy?
Yes, I would agree with Dan, what he just said, because what makes no sense to just put the money and hold it into like earning nothing. If they're going to do the credit,
Well,
just apply it against. Wait, I'm not done. Let me
go ahead.
explain.
But I'm
They
saying you're
don't
just
apply it
saying
against.
it's earning nothing. It wouldn't be
Well,
earning
it's
investment.
moot. Yeah, but it's not right,
Yeah.
and that's the purpose of having it. Secondly, the reason we're doing this is to get a AAA rating. I spoke to Yolanda Greaves, who's a member of the selectmen over there in Ashland. They don't have this. They don't talk about this. So I don't think if S&P mentioning it was probably one of many things they mentioned, and I don't think this is keeping us from getting a AAA rating. I think there's other things keeping us from getting a AAA rating. I think we need to do due diligence. I think we need to study, well, what are we going to do? How does this impact OPEB? And who's going to decide control of it? I don't think this is really an appropriate time to let's set up a fund or anything like that. I think we should just take it off the whole article as something, another thing we shouldn't even be voting on this budget or this town
Agreed.
meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Ms. Ziemer, you got your hand up.
So if we put the money in that, if we put, say, the $40,000 rebate, whatever it is, in this account, what's the difference of it going there or the difference of it going in the Middlesex retirement, assuming it's not going to make any difference to our rating? Just
Well,
in the difference in the earning.
Well, I think that the idea, the concept behind this, well, there are two things, right? We've already talked about at a prior meeting about the motivation being the comment that S&P made about
Right.
towns under unfunded pension liability. Okay, so that's one motivation. I think the other motivation was that there was a concern that we're handing over this, essentially this rebate, we're applying it to our unfunded liability by letting them keep the money, right? And the question was, could we do better by taking the money, putting it into something like credit? You know, I guess the question is, what do they do with it when we give it to them, right? If, for example, we're getting some kind of credit with Middlesex County, but then they're not investing it or they're using it to pay current retirees, you know, and it's not earning money for us, then we'd be better off taking the money,
Right.
letting it earn get returns, and then applying it to our unfunded liability.
But the immediate difference is that it would be invested in the market if it goes into the Middlesex County retirement and however they're investing it, assuming it actually gets invested. But if we put it into the revolving fund, it wouldn't be a significant amount of money, so it probably would be earning cash rates. And at least my money market is currently yielding 1 basis point of yield. So that saves us money, I guess, if the market goes down. It costs us earnings if the market goes up. But again, it's also $40,000 or $50,000. I would just like to come up with a plan and have a sort of some rules and I think it's a good idea. I think that we may be able to invest it better than Middlesex County retirement, but we just need a sort of a real sum of money in there. And how do we get to that source?
But the other part of my question was, $1.5 million is taking us 30 years for OPEB.
Mm-hmm.
This, I know this isn't totally unfunded because it's supplementing our unfunded, whatever Middlesex is. Do we have any idea what our unfunded liability is?
We do,
It's
but
27 million.
Yeah. The real question is, do we have a plan to get there?
Yeah, that's what I have a concern with. We don't have a plan.
Right, because with $40,000 is.
This is just a little. It's a good idea. It's just a little bit not ready for prime time.
So let me just ask a general question. Are people objecting to one of the concerns Mary had, right, was not, I don't think she's going to lose any sleep over what we recommend, right? But one of the concerns that she had was this whole idea of, do we need special legislation versus stabilization fund? And are we okay with it? Let's say they come, select board, Travis, whoever comes back next town meeting and says, okay, we've thought about this. We have a plan. We're going to create the stabilization fund, and here's how we're going to set it up. Here's how we're going to fund it. Okay. Or here's how we would like to fund it, right? Because obviously we'd have to make a recommendation on the funding. Would people be okay with it being a stabilization fund, right? Because there was all this discussion about, does it have to be an OPEB trust? And we said, and Mary was kind of saying, look, I want you guys to be okay with it as a stabilization fund. So even if we vote, okay, we say, hey, we had the discussion, we think there's still a lot of questions about the funding side of it and how we're the plan to attack this liability, blah, blah, blah. But I think Mary's fundamental question to me will be, okay, but are you guys at least okay with it being a stabilization fund if we move forward with a plan?
Well, the thing is, it doesn't. I'm not sure. Does it have any specific rules about how the money can be used? Who can use it? I mean, like, I just,
There are statutes that govern stabilization funds, right? But unlike, just to be clear, for anybody who might be wondering why we have an OPEB trust and might not do that for this, right? The things about OPEB are governed by Chapter 32B, which are the things that govern retirement and all stuff like this. Those are the things that can very easily be changed to become mandatory. You remember the OPEB statutes basically say you can create this OPEB trust, but as part of that trust, you have to calculate your annual required contribution, even if you don't fund it there, blah, blah. They could come along, if you adopt that statute, a provision under that statute, they could come along and say, okay, well, now we're changing 32B to say you must fund it at the annual requirement. That's why we did a separate trust, because that's how we got into trouble with pensions and benefits in the first place, was they made it irrevocable. Stabilization fund, the statutes are not about what I would call purposeful stabilization funds. They don't sit there and say, okay, a stabilization fund is for this. They say, as a town, you can create a stabilization fund for any of a number of issues, and here are the rules of those funds. Not that just 2/3 vote to take money out. You have to have a dedicated purpose to the fund, but that purpose can be pretty much anything that town meeting approves. And, in other words, they're more administrative rules, not, hey, this is a pension stabilization fund and you have to fund a pension thing.
So
that was Mary's, and as far as investment, she did check that we can invest it just like we do with OPEB.
That is a concern, and maybe it's something that we could fix through a bylaw or something, so that the bylaw says that we can't use this stabilization fund for anything but funding sort of retirement or something. I just think we need to spend a little more time on it, because what I don't want is to start setting money aside and then have some future finance committee, town meeting, select board decide that they want to go and do something else with it all of a sudden, if we've been spending 10 years trying to get it going. And so that's why I think it's just a little bit, it's a good idea, good intention, a little half-baked at the moment.
Okay. I mean, as I said, I don't feel strongly either way. I would be okay with creating a fund, but if we want more, creating it unfunded. But if we don't want to create it and say, let's just wait till we have a better plan, I'm fine with that too. So go ahead, Sue.
Vin was up before me.
Okay.
I would agree with you. Just basically, let's hold off and doing anything, either creating, because I think we need to vet this and get a better understanding. And so should we get a special legislation, and so nobody can touch it, not a stabilization fund. It'll be in like a OPEB trust.
Okay.
These are things we need to bandy about and talk as a town and figure out. And I don't think we have enough time. We have enough issues on table. So why create it? And I don't think it's going to solve the AAA rating issue, which is the primary reason for doing that.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, I'm not
this year anyway.
I'm not disagreeing with any of you. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here and what we might go. Go ahead, Sue.
Well, that was going to be my question, is when do we come up for review again?
This review was requested by us. Okay. And there were two reasons it was requested.
No, but when's the next one? So we can request it anytime?
You can request it, right? It's usually aligned with debt. Like in this case, it was requested because we're probably going to go out to bond the treatment plan. And so there was, hey, can we get the better rating ahead of that? What do we get a rating on? But obviously there's a rating review that basically automatically occurs when you're issuing bonds, right? There's going to be a bond rating review, and certainly the banker, Mr. Alfred, could comment. But generally speaking, when you're going to go to market, there's a process by which a rating is applied to that issuance, and so they kind of do the ratings review as part of that.
Okay, so I'm in agreement with both Vin and Dan that we should do more.
So if that's the case, then our recommendation for Article, let me make sure I get the right one.
My first recommendation is they strike it from the whole warrant. But if they're going to keep it, then I would say yes. We make a recommendation to
indefinite postponement.
Indefinite postponement.
Make it based on what we have. And we have Mr. Sparrow here. He's hearing this conversation.
And Tina's on the phone too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think Tina's still on the phone. I got to say there are a couple of people on the phone. I didn't know. I saw a couple of them drop. I wasn't sure if that was Tina. But anyway, they're hearing us. So enough said. So okay, if that's the case, then what I would say is Someone would want to make the motion that we recommend indefinite postponement of Article 19.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so 20 is not us. 21, which I think was 22 before, we voted on, correct, Mark? That's the traffic lights?
Yes, we passed 7-0, favorable actually.
Raise, well, that should be raise and appropriate 5740.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
So I would be okay if this one also was put on the consent agenda. I mean, it's a small, I don't know if they were trying to keep away from all spending bills, but it's a small amount that we're, fine with. It's a small little thing. So I don't know if the select board is listening, they want to consider adding it to the consent agenda. I would be okay with it.
yeah, I don't think we did. Well, we voted favorably for it. So that's why I said anything we voted favorably.
I'm just bringing it up because it wasn't one of Jay's sort of, he didn't tag it.
Okay.
And
Okay, so
the same for 22, though that, because it's a bylaw, might not be sort of.
well, 22, I don't think can be on a consent agenda because that bylaws require 2/3 votes or 3/4 votes or something like that.
I was thinking that may be the case, so.
Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say, but I think that I know bylaws require special voting, so they may not be able to be consentable. And 24/actual 23, we have there's no financial thing on that, so we're good. And I did hear from the petitioners, and they said, let me just double check what they said after we had the discussion last week. Give me a second here, gotta find the email. Okay. Oh no, that's not it. That was last week's. Too many emails here. The heck was it? I got it. Yesterday, I think. Oh, I can't.
You had told us last week that there was no issue with the animal control officer, and I don't think there was any financial impact to the town.
Correct. But there was a. Hold on, let me see if I can find it real quick. The only reason I'm checking is because I got another email from, I just wanted to make sure. They just asked, okay, is there anything else you need from us? And I don't think there is, because there's no finance committee.
After reading this, I know we're not going to vote on it. I mean, there's a lot of sort of vagary in it, and it's just, well, personal perspective. I'm not a financial perspective, and one will bring it up. But they don't define animal shelter or animal rescue organization.
Yes, it does. There's a whole separate page of definitions.
Oh, I'm missing the page. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go read that then. But then anyway, they talk about any pet shop operating within Holliston, which I thought they just sort of anyway. But
well, again, they have a definition for pet shop there, so.
Okay, I'll go back and get that.
Yeah, go check it. And that's not financial anyway. So you can, obviously, we're all free to, I know it may not seem that way sometimes, but we are 7 individuals that can object to can comment on non-financial things as independent registered voters. So, okay, so that means we have recommendations for the articles. We have a budget. Last thing is the warrant message. And Vin, you sent me something hacked up about as close to the meeting as you possibly could have sent it.
Yeah, you do that. Yeah, 15 minutes before the meeting. So that's when I sent it. So
that's fine. That's fine. Hey, look, I'm just saying. So
just quickly, it's 9 o'clock.
Yes, I know. So let me see. So what did you want to talk about your changes, Vin? Because I haven't had a chance to even look at it yet. Did you send that to the whole? Well,
no, just to you. I wouldn't send everything to everybody. Hold on, let me find warrant. Nope, hold on, it's the wrong one. That it's from Vin. I'll send it to everybody.
Okay. Go ahead.
Shall I send it to everybody?
Yes.
Well, you doing that? Can I just go over a couple of mine?
Yes, go ahead. But let me pull it up here so I can make the edits. Okay, go ahead.
So the 5th line, it said completed a state of emergency you were saying that by the time these reviews were completed, a state of emergency had been, you need been.
Oh, yeah,
declared?
okay. Had been, I think that was one of Vin's changes too.
Okay.
Well, he had a whole thing.
And then right below that is the state's economy, you need apostrophe S.
Hold on, hold on, wait. Had been, and this, okay, states, okay, yeah, well, you know, you could, it depends on how you refer to it, right? It's the state's economy, state
capital, but you know, okay.
Right, okay, whatever.
Had ground to a halt, and then I would just add along with most of the United States.
Cool.
Well, okay, it's funny you mentioned that because I originally wrote that as the state and U.S. economy, but I was like, is it correct to say state and U.S. economies, right? Like I was trying to figure out, so I just said, okay, I'll just say state economy because that's the one we cared about. So, you know what I mean? Like I was trying to figure out what the proper phrasing of that would be.
Well, I just want to make, you know, that Holliston's, I mean, everyone knows, so it's not a big deal. Then below where it says 400 from stabilization fund, I said with majority to be placed in the reserve fund. But I get what you're sort of saying to be, so you want to say that all of it's going into the reserve fund. So that's that. And then, when it comes to the schools requirements, schools are looking at various options for opening safely in the fall. And then I would just add with all options coming at increased costs.
Okay, let's see. Okay, where we? What paragraph are we talking about here?
For many years, the finance committee.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see.
And then the fourth line from the bottom.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So we can vary for open safety and fall. And I'll put parenthetically each. What was your phrase you wanted to add?
With all options coming at an increased cost, no matter, you know, or something, you know, with all coming at a degree of increased cost or something like that.
I said with all options coming with increased costs.
Yep.
Okay.
I would point out that I'm the vice chair, not Michelle.
Oh yeah, I didn't change. Well, no, I didn't change that because I need Mark's middle initial.
You need Mark's middle initial, and I have that actually commented there. And the only sort of more substantive thing is what we don't say in here is to discuss why most of the budgets show increases even though we're at zero. And
yes.
The reason for that is the managerial salary adjustments that are flowing through. And I would like to add something about that. But
okay, so do you have? Okay, well, okay. Hold on. Let me.
I didn't come up with sort of language or anything, just because I wanted to see if that was the sort of consensus of the committee before I did it.
That was my only comment, is that I thought it should go in there.
Okay.
I didn't have any language, but I did see it and I saw it was omitted and I thought it should go in.
Okay, first of all, Mark, what's your middle initial?
R. Or if you're from Boston, it's
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, so I got that. Okay, so now, let's go through Vin's because I want to make sure we get the final right here.
If
So
we start from the bottom, because should it be
Start from the
chair
bottom?
instead of chairman in this politically?
should I say?
No, I'm looking at the finance committee names and it says chair. Even Dan said chair, vice chair. And so if we're all being consistent, should it be
how he
chair?
decides to call himself, actually. I think that we're all, you know, in this.
Well, I know what he calls
If
himself.
we're really woke, it really should be his choice.
The
Well,
chairman actually is gender agnostic if in the definition, so
Yeah,
I don't think it matters.
I know, but
Way to go, Sue. Thank you for saying it. No,
Well, I don't think
agree
it
with that.
matters, so.
Okay.
Make it consistent. So if you're chair, I'm chair.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. I'm not a piece of furniture, but yes, I'll put it that way just for.
language is fluid.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Right.
Okay,
So his fluidity is chairman.
okay, so I see committee and you want a capital F there. Okay, fine. Okay, it's the first paragraph. The first, okay, so has now. Okay, so I'm going bottom up because you started at the bottom. So now if we're in that for many years paragraph, okay.
You can do this from the top down for now. It was just because we're down there.
Okay. You just wanted to be a pain in the ass about chair. Okay.
We were there, yeah.
Okay, fine. So start top down. Okay, so you said, okay, you want to say at the start of the budget process for the FY21 budget.
We were expecting a slight increase. I think the way it was written, it wasn't Hold on, let me pull it up when it was written like. It looked
No, I
awkward.
think that's exactly, I actually disagree with that change. I think that's overly wordy. I said basically.
I have a tendency to be overly wordy. Ask my
What?
wife. I do have a tendency to be overly wordy, so that's fine.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is because I wrote when the Finance Committee began reviewing budgets for FY21 at the start of the year. I did that specifically to say we were expecting a slight increase in local aid, to point out that was pre-pandemic, right? By the time these reviews are completed, state of emergency declared. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I'm saying I don't think we need to say at the start of the budget process for the FY21 budget, because that's kind of implied when I said when we started reviewing budgets for FY21. At least the way it's showing on my screen. Maybe I need to look at it in Word, because I don't know if Google is showing me what you're removing, but it looks to me like you have a lot of additions and just a few crossouts.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, so then you said by the time the review completed, a state of emergency had been declared, which is what I wrote. Okay, had been declared, and many businesses had been closed. Many businesses had been closed, and a state of emergency, which resulted in the state's economy basically, which resulted in the economy of the state basically grinding to a halt. Yes, that's. Again, I don't like the wordiness of that. I purposely made that a nice, very compact parallel sentence. So the only thing I agree with is we got to say, if you want to say state and U.S. economy, but as I said, do you refer to both of them as a plural? Like, would you say U.S. state and U.S. economies had ground to a halt? Is that the right way? That's the question.
Don't ask me.
So okay, let's see, ground halt. So the U.S. economy is now in a severe recession, and you wanted to add, and the anticipated revenue for the state is expected to decline. Okay, so, you just combined the two sentences. See, it's funny, because I tried to be much more succinct this time, and you undid all my succinct. All your changes are making my sentences longer.
Fine, just leave it like that. That's fine.
Okay, that's fine. No, I'm just saying, if you want to, I'm just asking if you want me to leave it, or I'm looking.
I don't. If nobody else agrees, which I have a tendency to be wordy, and it wasn't supposed to be public consumption, but that's fine.
Well, let me ask you a question. Does anybody have any other objections to this? Vin sent out his changes, so take a look at his changes. And if there are any you want to implement, let me know. And I'll put them in rather than reading them all. I think you are an accountant. I can tell you're an accountant because you should have been a lawyer. Like
No.
when everything that's inferred in here, you want to explicitly state, which is kind of funny.
I do. I like to have everything explicit.
Just to be clear, Vin, it's not a contract. It's just a warrant message.
Ken, did you update the FY21 capital number on your?
I did that in the local copy when I saw it just now.
Cool.
So yes, I'll just double check that. It was 1/5/13. Okay, so I saw that when I was reading it, and I was like, okay, got to make sure I do that.
Either way is fine with me. Whatever people want.
Okay. Now let's just deal with that. Does anybody want any of the changes? If you like them, say so. If you don't think it makes a difference, if you want to leave it the way it is, that's fine. Whatever. I'm just saying, let's decide on that, and then we'll add. We'll decide whatever language you want to add about the salaries.
Do you want to put something about other towns? Like I put a little note, cuts in other towns.
Yeah, that'd be good. That means, and
I'm trying to see what that is. Where'd you put that?
I put it as a note under cuts, implement cuts. It was the second paragraph, last sentence. Something like we put cuts as other towns in the area have been making, I would say. I didn't actually write something, but I think
what I'm looking at doesn't have that noted in it. It just says.
You don't have notes, probably. Do you have it all marked up?
Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at it in Google, whatever it is.
Oh.
Email.
I hate Google.
Okay. Well, I hate their tools as well, but that's what we got for the thing. Okay, so as you said, implement cuts. you just added to the end of that sentence, as other towns have had to do, or something?
Something like that. I don't know where. I just put a little note saying maybe add something about the other towns in the area. So I don't know what you want to suggest.
Well, the question is, do you want it in the message? Because that is something obviously that will be in the presentation, right? I mean, the presentation is going to be short, sweet, and it's going to focus on, we're here because
Okay.
we've been disciplined.
That's fine. Leave it alone. Just mention it.
Okay. Okay, so if nobody sees anything else, the other changes were relatively minor. But if nobody sees anything else, then let's focus on getting the paragraph. So what would you like to say, and where would you want to say it, Dan?
I would like to say it should be noted that many of the budgets are not actually 0% due to this is where we due to.
Well, we could, where it would go, I think we'd put it after in the where we say against this backdrop, that paragraph where it ends with saying having implement cuts.
Yeah.
We could add a sentence or something there that says.
Yeah, that's where I put it. A sentence right after the FY20.
After FY20.
You're trying to explain it's all 0 except for, and then except for those.
Well, to adapt to it should be after that sentence.
Okay, yeah, I see. Against the first, after the first sentence of that paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you would. Okay, give me a sentence you want to put in there.
It should be noted that many of the departments are actually above the 0% guideline due to managerial salary adjustments that the select board made in fiscal year 2021, in fiscal year 2020, that were above the $75,000 set aside by town meeting on an annualized basis by October May 2019.
And you said I was wording.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to be not entirely incendiary.
Well, how about if you just, Dan, how about if we just add a sentence that says it should be noted that many of the departments are above the 0% guideline due to the managerial salary adjustments made by the select board in September 2019.
That's fine. It's not incendiary or anything.
Yeah.
Well, but you don't want to explain.
I wouldn't.
You want to explain in that details to everything.
No, I think, but at that, I don't think it's really germane or applicable to put it in this letter. I think it's something we
address at town meeting.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
That works for me.
No, I think that's fine. I'm reading back through some of the prior stuff just to see if there was anything else, but I think that sounds okay.
Okay.
Could we also should we note that there are fewer employees than were previously expected in this as well?
In
the message.
No, but I'm saying, like, what exactly do you mean? Like, we didn't reduce staff, but we didn't add personnel.
No. The increases that were made were
you mean
20. There were 29%. Right, they were 29% above what was approved by town meeting, and there were fewer people that actually received the adjustments than were expected. I just didn't know if we wanted to.
Well, my philosophy about this is we are going to have the discussion. We waited till this time to have the discussion at town meeting, right? We point out in the message, this is why they're above 0. At town meeting, one or more of us will certainly, address the issue of the process that was followed. And I don't think, in other words, I think that half the people will read it here and won't care. I think if you get up at town meeting when we're discussing it, and we know that someone's going to get up and discuss it, and someone says, hey, the salaries that were, exceeded the 75,000 on an annual basis, covered fewer people. I think all that's going to come out and in the discussion that we're going to have. So I don't know if we need to put that in the message.
Okay. I'm okay with that then.
Okay, Michelle, you're on mute.
So there are two things, and I just don't know if they should go in the message or if they'll go in the PowerPoint. And the first is explanation of the 1/12 budget.
Oh my God, we don't want to put that in here. First of all, that's not relevant to the omnibus, right? In the sense that the omnibus we're asking them to pass it's only tied to the 1/12 from the point of view of if you spent the money, it counts against this thing. But I think that'll be going in the presentation because I think that's just a bullet point. I can very easily make that say that this is the process because of the emergency, the 1/12 budget, the amounts you're approving tonight are inclusive of the 1/12 budgets. It's not supplemental to them. So
Okay.
those 1/12 budgets go away and anything that was spent counts against these appropriations. So,
Okay, and then the other thing I think probably will be in your PowerPoint, because you go through the warrant articles, and that's the stipends, like the assessor stipend.
yes. Well, that one, yeah, that's gonna be in the presentation because that's something we voted to take out. So anything where we have a recommendation that doesn't at first glance seem to jive with anything, that's what I explained. I'm gonna try to cut down on that this year for this sake of time, but obviously I'm gonna explain, I try to pre-explain anything that people need to understand that's different. So.
Okay.
Because you know what's going to happen, right? People are going to see the report and they're going to see that we didn't support it, right? And so I'll just point out that, this article, and because I'll have to explain two things there. One is why are we doing this adjustment for the town clerk, and why are we recommending an adjustment for the town clerk, and why are we lowering stipends? So I'll definitely address that in the presentation. So, Mr. Murphy, you had your hand up?
No, it was probably from an older one, so no.
Okay. Well, I had the screen blocked for a little while. Okay. So if we think that this is good, let me do this. I will save it and I will send it to everybody right now just for one final view. And we can make sure everybody gets one final look.
If you'd indulge me for just a moment, I have a weird question on this.
Go right ahead. Everybody else start reading when you get it.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if everybody, if it's commonplace or if it's just something that I'm just, silly about. But it seems to me there's no kind of summary of what goes on. And I know this isn't a long read, but I guarantee you that to some people this is a long read. So I'm just curious if it would be smart to put in a summary or if it just, it is what it is. Who cares if you can't understand it?
Well, you mean a summary in what sense? A summary of what the budget is? A summary of?
No, I mean and this, for the lack of better terms, the too long don't have time to read it. TLDR. Here's what this says. And I don't know if that would be something that and maybe that's just not appropriate. And if that's the case, then that's great. Just say, Mark, you're an idiot. And I'm fine with it.
Well, no, you're not an idiot. I think it's a valid point, and you're correct. But I do think it's it is, you need to, look, if you're going to come to town meeting and you're going to exercise authority as a registered voter to pass a $66 million budget or whatever it is, right? You better have time to read a page and, a page or two, right? So I agree with you. If you're right, if we were submitting a 40-page document that was just prose and we said, okay, here's a summary, executive summary, makes sense. But in this case, we've boiled down, 7 months, actually more than that at this point, because we've gone to July and we started in November, right? You're boiling all that down to one page. And I don't want somebody voting on that budget without doing at least knowing this much, right? I don't want them voting because they see a bullet point that says budget is $66 million and they say, oh, I'm fine with that, right? At least know what you're voting for, right?
Because and you do your presentation. So
yes, and I do the presentation at town meeting. So
okay, that makes perfect sense. I just wasn't sure if it was a procedural thing or if this, for all intents and purposes, this is the distilled version, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no. The reason years and years ago, I started doing the presentations for just this reason, because people would come to town meeting and they would say, oh, well, what about this? What about this? And it was like, okay, you get asked a lot of the same questions, and it's clear people didn't go into, not the message, but the document's pretty big, right? With all the recommendations and the tables and everything, right? So that's why I started doing it and kind of saying, okay, here's how we got here. Here are the couple of slides that explain revenue, explain the expenses. explain the weird things that you may look at and say, this doesn't make sense, but here's why it makes sense. And then let them take it from there. And then, you still get questions, but at least you cut down the 80% of the people who are just asking the basics. You've covered the fundamentals. And then you get people that have specific issues about one or two things they see to make it go faster. So yeah, that's the presentation will be where people that don't even read this will get at least a brief education on how we ended up at this point. So yes, Mr. Maxwell.
So I was being geeky and pulled up our bylaws, and in our main 2019 bylaws, it's officially chairman, vice chairman, and clerk.
I think we're going to appoint Vin as the clerk if he tries to do this again. Okay, so you want me to change it to official chairman, vice chair, and clerk. Okay, I'll change it back.
Blame Dan, he called you chair.
Vice chair and vice chair, just our bylaws are specific.
Yep. That's fine.
We gotta follow the bylaws, Ken. I feel very strongly about always following the bylaws.
Right. So, okay. So is everybody taking a quick look at a reread to see there wasn't much change? Made a couple of Vin's typo type corrections, Dan's corrections, added the sentence, changed the capital number. So.
Do we need a motion to approve?
Yes, we do. I was going to say, if everybody's good with it, somebody move that we approve the warrant message.
Are we sure that the warrant articles are the right numbers?
Oh, that's a good point. What do we, let's see, let's check that. 13, is 13 still, okay.
I'm just looking at
12 and 13 should still be the same. Okay.
Maybe
12 and 13 are fine.
Maybe to be safe, to strike those numbers.
And I need to change the amount in 12. I changed it in one spot, not the other. So let me fix it. Okay. What did you say, Vin?
Maybe strike the numbers and just reference those article titles, just in case they get changed.
Well, the report, the FinCom report will not go out until I have the final warrant. They have to sign it and then they give it to me so I can adjust the numbers.
Okay.
I don't believe that counts as a revotable change if I adjust the numbers because they changed the warrant. So, yes, Mr. Maxwell.
Under capital reserve stabilization OPEB.
I fixed it. I just saw it while I was looking at it. That's why I said I changed it in one spot and missed the other. So, yeah. Okay. So Michelle, did you check? It's 12 still, 12, 13, 17, and 18?
Well,
I didn't look at 17 and 18 because I'm looking on I have it on my phone and
okay. Let me check. 17 and 18 are.
But you're going to check them. You're going to check them anyway before you mail it out. So.
Correct.
Okay. So then I make a motion to approve the
warrant message as edited.
As edited. Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the warrant message? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. Okay. So congratulations, we now have sausage. So okay, so we have, I believe that was the last thing on our agenda for today, but let me double check. Anything else? Now, the one thing I do want to discuss before we adjourn here is next week, as I said, my original plan was we didn't need to meet next week because we usually do that as a Q&A, which we can't do this year because of the pandemic. But now we need to meet for a couple of minutes to approve this line item transfer.
We could do Q&A. You can just show up to Zoom. I mean,
yeah, that's true. But anyways, we'll meet next week. We'll meet next week. But the question that I had was, how do you want to handle our pre-town meeting? Because we don't want to meet as a group, or we can, but it would be distant. Whatever I'm saying, do we want to literally, instead of meeting and adjourning right to town meeting, do we want to meet virtually like an hour before and then adjourn to town meeting so that we give ourselves like half an hour to get over there or something like that?
Let's since we still have the chief on the phone, I would prefer to try to do it in just there if we can, even if it's outside or something. Maybe we can finally take one of your. Can we
post? I wonder if we can post and say outside the school. So Chief Cassidy, if you're still awake and still in your dress clothes, what do you think about the pre-meetings before town meeting?
So you would still need to maintain physical distancing, and as long as you specify in your posting where you will be meeting, so that if any member of the public wishes to observe or participate, you would be allowed to do that.
How about the red swing set area?
That's right. The Miller School playground. No,
Do you know
What room is it?
do you know where there may be room for us to meet?
That would probably be a better question for Mr. Boudet, because any room that you meet in, if it's being used for extended school year the next day, would need to be cleaned prior to use.
Yeah.
Maybe we should meet in the cafetorium.
No, we can't.
Well, we can't, because that's where town meeting is, right? So we could in theory, but I'm saying I'm sure they're going to be setting up.
Why don't we just do Zoom?
I would prefer Zoom because I'm already concerned about having to sit in town meeting for a lot of hours. So my preference would be to minimize the contact.
Okay, so what I will do then, presuming I believe town meeting is still 7:30, right, Mr. Chief Cassidy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll post this for like 6:30 on Zoom, and then we'll plan to be, what?
6 for the week.
I would do
Okay.
6.
Okay, 6. Okay, I'll post this for 6, and then we'll post for Zoom on 6, and then when we adjourn, we'll physically go over a town meeting.
So I just have a question. Is Show going to deliver sandwiches to us at our houses or what? No. Okay.
That's right.
To your car,
That's right.
you have to drive up to my driveway and I'll put it through your window.
This is the worst part about COVID. Oh.
I know. This will be the first town meeting I can't eat at. So, okay, so there's
people,
that,
will it be very clearly marked where we're sitting?
Yes.
Yeah, can we actually post for next week to have Chief Cassidy maybe just talk to us about how town meeting is going to work? Yeah, sorry, but
yeah, that's fine.
I am
Because
concerned.
I need to know, we all need to know how that's going to work. The other thing, Chief Cassidy, is are we going to have dedicated I know you know for the audience, but for example, am I going to have a dedicated microphone since I'll probably be talking a lot and things like that? Or are we going to still have the central podium type thing?
A hybrid of those two. We're going to have a bank of microphones that will be available, and the moderator will be indicating to speakers who are recognized to speak which microphone they may use, so that after one is used, it can be wiped down before the next person uses it.
Okay, well, I was just saying that I understand that for general debate, but I was just, for example, I thought that maybe the select board would have one microphone so that they'd all speak through one person, so to speak, and then FinCom, and then, it's okay. It's no big deal. We don't have to work that out tonight. I was just wondering because as I said, typically I have to answer all the financial questions. And so I was just wondering if I would have a dedicated mic rather than having to make somebody clean the mic every time I spoke. So,
yeah,
anyway.
We're going to be meeting with Chris Mayo and HCAT and school representatives to make sure that we've got all of the AV lined up. So I should have a better framework for next week.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's it then. If we have nothing else, then I'll entertain the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, Dan, say second.
Second.
Okay, not subject to debate. We'll proceed to a roll call vote. Mr. Alfred.
Yes.
Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yes.
And I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, July 7th meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you just heard, we'll be meeting again next Tuesday, the 14th. And then next up after that will be town meeting on July 20th. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.